When my husband of 30 years told me he was working late nights for our future, I believed him. Days later, I was staring at his corpse in a funeral home while his mistress smirked in my face. That's when I realized life isn't just a deck of cards. It's a deck where someone's always marking the aces. If you're watching this, please subscribe and tell me in the comments if you've ever had to smile while someone was stabbing you in the heart. Trust me, what happens next will make your jaw hit the floor. I remember standing there, my black dress still smelling of the store where I'd bought it just hours before. My husband Harold, the man I'd nursed through 2 heart attacks and a business bankruptcy, lay in that shiny mahogany casket looking better in death than he had in our last 5 years of marriage. The mortician had done wonders with his sunken cheeks and the permanent frown lines around his mouth. They'd combed his hair the way I always told him looked best, not the way he insisted on wearing it. The irony wasn't lost on me. He finally listened to me after he was dead. I hadn't cried yet. Not really. The tears that had come were more from shock than grief. Harold's heart attack had been sudden. He'd collapsed at his office downtown. By the time I got the call from the hospital, he was already gone. Just like that. 30 years of marriage ended between my morning coffee and afternoon soap opera. The funeral home was quiet except for the soft organ music playing from hidden speakers. I'd been greeting a few early arrivals, Harold's brother Tom and his wife, a couple of business associates who had actually bothered to show up. That's when I saw her. She walked in like she owned the place, wearing a black dress that cost more than my car. It hugged curves I didn't know existed at my age, and she teetered on heels so high I wondered how she didn't topple over. Her blonde hair, obviously dyed, I could spot those roots from across the room, was pulled back in an elegant chignon. And those red lips, blood red, like she'd been drinking something darker than wine. I knew immediately. Call it woman's intuition, or just the way she looked right past me to Harold's body, like she had more right to grieve than I did. This was her. The reason for all those late nights. The perfume I sometimes smelled on his collar that wasn't mine. The mysterious text messages he'd shielded from my view. Still, I approached her with as much dignity as I could muster. I was, after all, Harold's wife. His legal wife. The mother of his children. The woman who had stood beside him when his first business venture failed, and we had to sell our house. I deserved respect, if nothing else. "Hello," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Margaret, Harold's wife. Are you a friend of my husband's?" She looked me up and down, like she was appraising a used car, and something flashed behind her eyes. Was it pity? Amusement? Whatever it was, it made my skin crawl. "I'm Veronica," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. Harold and I were very close. The way she said close made me want to slap her. But I didn't. I just nodded, as if this was a perfectly normal conversation to be having over my husband's dead body. "I was just wondering," I said, trying to maintain my composure, "what time the funeral will be held tomorrow? I need to let some relatives know." That's when she leaned in close. I could smell her perfume, the same scent I detected on Harold's shirts. Her lips, those blood-red lips, curled into a smirk that would haunt my nightmares. "He's long gone," she whispered, her breath hot against my ear. "Now all his money is mine." The room seemed to tilt sideways. I grabbed the back of a nearby chair to steady myself, my knuckles turning white.
How dare she?
How dare this woman, this mistress, come to my husband's funeral and threaten me? What did she mean? All his money was hers. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by that perfect chignon and drag her out of the funeral home. I wanted everyone there to know what kind of woman she was, what kind of man Harold had been. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. A small, knowing smile that seemed to catch her off guard. Because in that moment, I remembered something Harold had told me just a month before, during one of his rare moments of clarity and remorse. "Maggie," he'd said, using my nickname from our early days, "I've made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I'm going to make things right. I promise you that." At the time, I thought he was talking about spending more time at home, maybe finally taking that cruise we'd always talked about. Now, I realized he might have meant something else entirely. I stepped back from Veronica, my smile still in place. "We'll see about that. I said quietly, then turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with her smug smile wavering just slightly. The next 3 days were a blur of funeral arrangements, condolence calls, and casseroles brought by neighbors who whispered behind my back. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Veronica's face, heard her words. All his money is mine. What did she know that I didn't? Had Harold changed his will? Had he really been planning to leave me with nothing after 30 years? The thought made me sick, but it also awakened something in me I hadn't felt in years. Determination. On the 3rd day after the funeral, I sat in our lawyer's office, James Harrington, who had handled all our legal matters for the past 20 years. Harold's brother Tom was there, looking uncomfortable in his ill-fitting suit. A few business partners from Harold's company sat stiffly in leather chairs. And then there was Veronica, draped in black like a widow, her red lipstick the only splash of color in her ensemble. She'd positioned herself directly across from me, as if we were opponents in a chess match, which I suppose we were. James cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. He was a thin man with thinning gray hair and kind eyes. He'd always treated me with respect, even when Harold would talk over me during meetings. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice solemn. "We're here today for the reading of Harold Montgomery's last will and testament." Veronica shifted in her seat, crossing her legs and letting her skirt ride up just a bit too high. I noticed one of Harold's business partners, Roger, I think his name was, eyeing her appreciatively. Men. Even at a will reading, they couldn't help themselves. James opened a folder on his desk, the papers inside crisp and official-looking. He began reading the standard legal jargon, words that washed over me without meaning. I was waiting, my heart pounding, for the part that mattered. The part that would either confirm my worst fears or... As to the disposition of my assets, James read, his voice suddenly louder, clearer. "I, Harold Montgomery, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath all of my property, both real and personal, all monies, investments, business interests, and belongings of any kind to..." There was a pause as James turned the page. Veronica leaned forward slightly, her red lips parted in anticipation. "My lawful wife, Margaret Elizabeth Montgomery." The room went silent. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Had I heard correctly? "Furthermore," James continued, "I specify that any woman who dishonors my wife in life or death shall inherit nothing and be barred from all claims to my estate." James looked up then, his eyes meeting mine for just a moment, and I saw something there. Was it satisfaction? He'd known what was in the will all along, of course. Had Harold told him about Veronica? I turned to look at her, and the sight nearly made me gasp. Her face had drained of all color, making her red lips stand out like a wound. She swayed slightly in her chair, her perfectly manicured hand reaching out to steady herself against the armrest. This is a mistake," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "Harold promised me..." "There's more," James interrupted, his tone firm. "Mr. Montgomery left a letter to be read in the event that a Miss Veronica Chambers was present at this reading." He pulled out another piece of paper from the folder. Veronica's eyes widened. The room seemed to close in around us, everyone else fading into the background. This was between her and me now. "Veronica," James read, and I could almost hear Harold's voice in the words, "If you're hearing this, then I didn't have the courage to end things between us while I was alive. For that, I'm sorry. What we had was a mistake, a selfish indulgence on my part that I deeply regret. I never intended to leave Margaret, and I certainly never intended to leave you anything in my will, despite what I may have led you to believe. Whatever promises I made to you were lies told by a weak man. My business, my home, my money, they were built with Margaret by my side. She deserves everything, and you deserve nothing. I hope you find peace, but find it far away from my family." I watched as the blood rushed back to Veronica's face, turning her cheeks an angry, blotchy red. Her hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white with rage. "You bitch," she hissed at me, all pretense of dignity gone. "You knew about this. You planned this." James slammed his hand on the desk. "Miss Chambers, Control yourself, or I will have you removed." Veronica stood up so quickly that her chair toppled backward, crashing to the floor. "This isn't over," she spat, gathering her purse and jacket. "Harold promised me everything. He loved me, not you. Never you." And with that, she stormed out, her high heels clicking angrily against the hardwood floor. The door slammed behind her with such force that a framed law degree on the wall rattled. The room remained silent for several long moments after her departure. I sat there, still processing what had just happened. Harold had left everything to me. He'd known about Veronica's threats, had perhaps even anticipated them. In his final act, he'd chosen me. "Mrs. Montgomery," James said finally, breaking the silence, "there are some papers for you to sign when you're ready. And might I add, on a personal note, that I'm very sorry for all of this." I nodded, still unable to find my voice. Harold's brother Tom came over and awkwardly patted my shoulder before leaving with the others, murmuring condolences and goodbyes. Soon it was just James and me in the office. "Did you know?" I asked him, my voice steadier than I expected. "About her?" James sighed, removing his glasses and polishing them with a handkerchief. "Harold came to see me about 6 months ago to change his will. He didn't go into details, but he seemed troubled, remorseful, even. When he instructed me to add that specific clause about anyone dishonoring you, I had my suspicions." I nodded, absorbing this information. 6 months ago. Had Harold been trying to end things with Veronica? Had he been trying, in his own way, to make amends? "There's something else you should know," James said, his voice lowering. "Harold's business. It's not in as good a shape as people think. There's some irregularities in the accounts. Nothing illegal, necessarily, but concerning. I was going to discuss it with Harold next week. Now, I suppose, it falls to you to decide how to proceed." My mind raced. Irregularities? What did that mean? Was the business in trouble? Was that why Harold had been working those late nights? Or had those late nights with Veronica caused him to neglect the business? "I'll need to see the books," I said, surprising myself with my assertiveness. "All of them. And I'll need your help understanding what I'm looking at." James nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. "Of course, Margaret. I think you'll find you're more capable than perhaps even you realize." As I drove home that evening, the manila envelope containing Harold's was sitting on the passenger seat beside me. A strange sense of calm settled over me. The initial shock of Harold's death, the humiliation of discovering his affair, the fear of being left with nothing, all of it was giving way to something else. A sense of purpose. Harold had betrayed me in the worst way a husband could betray a wife. He'd shared his body, his time, his affection with another woman. But in the end, he'd chosen to right that wrong, at least financially. He'd left Veronica with nothing but her wounded pride. But as I pulled into my driveway, something on the front porch caught my eye. A small package, wrapped in plain brown paper, sitting on the welcome mat. I approached it cautiously, looking around to see if anyone was watching. The street was quiet, no signs of who might have left it. I picked up the package. It was light, barely weighing anything at all, and carried it inside. In the safety of my kitchen, I carefully unwrapped the brown paper. Inside was a small box, and inside that, a black veil, the kind widows wear to funerals in old movies. And underneath it, a note written in elegant, slanting handwriting. "You may have one today, but you'll be the one buried next." A chill ran down my spine, but surprisingly, fear wasn't the primary emotion I felt. It was anger. Pure, clarifying anger. Who did this woman think she was? She'd slept with my husband, shown up at his funeral to taunt me, and now she was threatening me? In my own home? I carefully folded the veil and placed it back in the box, along with a note. Evidence, I thought, though of what crime? I wasn't yet sure. Then I walked to Harold's study, a room I'd rarely entered during his life, and sat down in his leather chair. The desk was large, mahogany, imposing, just like Harold had been. I ran my fingers along its smooth surface, then began opening drawers. Bills, statements, contracts, and in the bottom drawer, locked but easily opened with a key I'd found in Harold's personal effects, a stack of photographs. My hands trembled as I lifted them out. I knew what they would be before I even looked. Harold and Veronica. Together. Happy. In places I'd never been with him. A beach somewhere tropical, a ski resort, a fancy restaurant with the New York skyline visible through the window. The dates on the backs of the photos told me their affair had been going on for at least 2 years. 2 years of lies. 2 years of working late and business trips that were actually romantic getaways with his mistress. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt oddly detached, as if I were looking at strangers. The man in these photos, laughing, relaxed, looking at Veronica with undisguised desire, wasn't the Harold I knew. My Harold had been serious, often distant, consumed by his work. When was the last time he'd looked at me the way he was looking at her in these pictures? I put the photos aside and continued searching. In another drawer, I found a small black address book. Flipping through it, I saw names I recognized, business associates, friends, family members. And then, on a page near the back, a name circled in red, Veronica Chambers. Below it, an address in the upscale part of town, a phone number, and what looked like an entry code for a security gate. Had Harold been that careless? Or had he wanted me to find this? Another breadcrumb leading me towards some truth he couldn't face telling me while he was alive? Next to the address book was a USB drive, unlabeled. I booted up Harold's computer, password protected, of course, but I knew it. Our wedding anniversary, the one date he never forgot because I always reminded him a week in advance, and plugged in the drive. It contained financial records, spreadsheets, bank statements, transfers to offshore accounts. Names I didn't recognize, amounts that made my eyes widen. I wasn't an accountant or a businesswoman. I'd been a teacher before I quit to raise our children, and after they left home, I'd filled my days with volunteer work and taking care of our home. But even I could see that something wasn't right with these numbers. Harold had been moving money around, large sums. Hiding it? From whom? From me? From Veronica? From the IRS? The thought struck me suddenly. What if Veronica knew about this money? What if that's what she meant when she said all his money was hers? Not the legitimate assets that would be distributed through the will, but these hidden funds? My head was spinning. It was too much to process in one night. I shut down the computer, removed the USB drive, and put everything back where I'd found it. Then I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did, and sat at the table, staring at the black veil still sitting in its box. "You'll be the one buried next," Veronica had written. Was it just an empty threat from a scorned woman? Or did she know something I didn't? Was there danger lurking in those financial records? I took a sip of wine, feeling its warmth spread through me. Harold was gone. His mistress had been publicly humiliated. I had inherited everything, the house, the business, whatever money was legitimate. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something vast and treacherous. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Something had awakened in me, something that had been dormant during my years as Harold's wife. Determination. Curiosity. A fierce desire to know the truth, whatever it might be. Veronica thought she could intimidate me with her threats? She was about to learn what I was just discovering myself, that the quiet, compliant Margaret Montgomery had died along with her husband. And the woman who emerged from that funeral home was someone else entirely. I picked up the phone and dialed James Harrington's number. It was late, but this couldn't wait. "James? It's Margaret Montgomery. I need to meet with you first thing tomorrow. There's something in Harold's records that you need to see." The next morning dawned gray and misty, matching my mood as I drove to James's office. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with questions about Harold's financial dealings. The USB drive was in my purse, along with the black veil and threatening note from Veronica. James was waiting for me, looking as if he hadn't slept much either. His office was quiet, most of his staff not yet arrived for the day. "Margaret," he greeted me, his expression concerned. "You sounded worried on the phone. What have you found?" I placed the USB drive on his desk. "I don't know exactly what I'm looking at, I admitted, but something doesn't feel right. James plugged the drive into his computer, and we spent the next hour going through the files. His expression grew increasingly grave. "This is worse than I thought," he said finally, removing his glasses and rubbing his eyes. Harold was moving company funds through shell corporations. Some of it ended up in an account in the Cayman Islands. "Is it illegal?" I asked, my throat dry. "Possibly tax evasion, possibly embezzlement if the money came from investors. Without more information, it's hard to say for sure." James looked at me directly. "Did you know about any of this?" "No," I said firmly. Harold kept me completely in the dark about his business dealings. James nodded, believing me. "The problem is, as his widow and now the owner of the company, you could be held liable if this comes to light." My stomach dropped. What should I do? "We need to conduct a thorough audit quietly. Figure out exactly what Harold was doing and how to fix it without alerting the authorities." He paused. "Or his business partners." I thought of Roger and the others at the will reading. Had they known? Were they involved? "There's something else," I said, taking out the black veil and note. "Veronica left this at my house yesterday." James read the note, his expression darkening. A threat. We could go to the police. "And tell them what?" "That my husband's mistress is angry she didn't get his money?" I shook my head. "They'd laugh me out of the station. Besides, I don't think that's what she meant." "What do you mean?" I leaned forward. "I think she knows about the money. The hidden money. I think that's what she meant when she told me at the funeral that all his money was hers." James frowned, considering this. If she was involved in Harold's financial schemes, that would make sense. She might believe she has a claim to those funds, separate from the will. "How would we find out?" "I know a private investigator," James said after a moment. "Discreet, thorough. He could look into Veronica's background, see if there's any connection to these offshore accounts." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of resolve. "Do it. And in the meantime, I want to learn everything I can about Harold's business. No more hiding in the dark for me." James gave me a small smile. "Harold always underestimated you, didn't he?" "Everyone did," I replied, surprising myself with my candor. "Including me." Over the next week, I immersed myself in Harold's world. I visited his office downtown, introduced myself to his employees, many of whom seemed surprised to meet me. Had Harold never mentioned me? Had I been so invisible in his life? I spoke with his executive assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia who had worked for Harold for 15 years. She was coolly professional, but I sensed she knew more than she was saying. "Mrs. Montgomery," she said as she showed me Harold's office, untouched since his death, "your husband was a complicated man." "I'm beginning to realize that," I replied, running my fingers along the edge of his desk. "Did you know her? Veronica?" Patricia's expression remained neutral, but something flashed behind her eyes. "Miss Chambers?" "Yes," she called, quite often, and visited occasionally. "Here? At the office?" The thought of Veronica in this space, perhaps sitting in Harold's chair, made my skin crawl. "Yes, ma'am. Usually after hours, but sometimes during the day." Mr. Montgomery would clear his schedule for her. He never cleared his schedule for me, I thought bitterly. Not even when our son graduated from college or our daughter had her first child. "Patricia," I said, choosing my words carefully, "I get the feeling there's something you want to tell me." The assistant hesitated, glancing at the open door to ensure we were alone. "Your husband changed in the last few months. He seemed troubled. He and Miss Chambers argued frequently. I overheard one such argument about 2 weeks before he died. She was demanding something, money, I think, and he refused. She said she would tell everything if he didn't comply." My heart raced. Tell everything? What did she mean? "I don't know, ma'am." But afterward, Mr. Montgomery started staying even later than usual, going through files, making phone calls to the Cayman Islands. Patricia lowered her voice. "And he asked me to pull all the company insurance policies, especially the ones covering financial malfeasance. Insurance policies that would protect the company and its shareholders if someone were caught embezzling funds." Harold had been preparing for something. "Thank you, Patricia," I said, my mind working rapidly. "I'd like you to continue as my assistant if you're willing. I'm going to need someone who knows the company." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Of course, Mrs. Montgomery. I think your husband would have wanted that." As I left the office that day, I felt eyes on me. Turning, I caught a glimpse of a blonde woman in the lobby, quickly disappearing behind a column. "Veronica?" I hurried toward the spot, but by the time I reached it, she was gone. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a car parked across the street, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. It hadn't been there when I left that morning. I made a note of the license plate number, then hurried inside, double-checking that all the doors were locked. My phone rang just as I was making dinner. It was James. "Margaret, the PI has some preliminary information on Veronica Chambers. You might want to sit down for this." I sank into a kitchen chair, my heart pounding. "Go ahead." "She's not who she says she is. Her real name is Victoria Chamberlain. She's been involved in similar situations before, relationships with wealthy older men who then die suddenly, leaving their assets in disarray." "Are you saying she killed them?" The words felt ridiculous coming out of my mouth, like something from a bad movie. No evidence of that, but in at least 2 cases, large sums of money disappeared around the time of death. And here's the kicker. One of those men had an account at the same bank in the Cayman Islands that Harold used. The room seemed to spin around me. She was helping him hide the money. Or she was blackmailing him, James suggested. Either way, she might believe she has a claim to those offshore funds. But how would she access them? Wouldn't they be in Harold's name? "That's what worries me," James said, his voice grim. "If she has account numbers, passwords, she might be able to empty those accounts before we can trace them. If she hasn't already." After we hung up, I sat in the darkening kitchen, thinking, if Veronica, Victoria, had access to Harold's hidden money, why threaten me? Why not just take it and disappear? Unless there was something else, something she needed from me. I thought of Harold's office, the files I'd seen on his desk. His computer, still password protected with passwords I might be able to guess. What if there was something there she needed? Some code or document that would give her access to the rest of the money. My thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the front door. I froze, listening. It came again, more insistent this time. Cautiously, I approached the door, peering through the peephole. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark suit. Not someone I recognized. "Who is it?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mrs. Montgomery? My name is Detective Wilson, Metropolitan Police. I need to speak with you about your husband." "Police?" My heart raced. Had they discovered the offshore accounts? Was I about to be arrested for Harold's financial crimes? I opened the door a crack, the chain still in place. "May I see some identification?" The man held up a badge that looked official enough, though I wasn't sure what a real police badge should look like. He had a stern face, with cold eyes that didn't match his polite smile. "What's this about?" I asked, not removing the chain. "There are some irregularities surrounding your husband's death that we'd like to discuss. May I come in?" Irregularities? What did that mean? Harold had died of a heart attack. There had been an autopsy, standard procedure given his relatively young age, and the suddenness of his death. No one had mentioned anything suspicious. Something didn't feel right. The black car across the street. This detective showing up unannounced in the evening. "I'm actually just on my way out," I lied. "Could we do this tomorrow? At the police station?" A flicker of annoyance crossed the man's face. "This is a sensitive matter, Mrs. Montgomery. It would be better to discuss it privately." "I'm sorry, but I really must insist. Tomorrow morning, I'll come to the station. Which precinct should I go to?" The man's friendly demeanor vanished. "Open the door, Mrs. Montgomery. Now." Fear shot through me like ice water. I slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt just as he rammed his shoulder against it. The door shuddered, but held. I ran to the kitchen, grabbing my phone and ducking down behind the island as I heard a crash from the front of the house. He was breaking in. With shaking fingers, I dialed 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" "There's a man breaking into my house," I whispered urgently. He claimed to be a police detective, but a hand clamped over my mouth from behind, cutting off my words. The phone was wrenched from my grasp and thrown across the room. I hadn't heard him come in through the back door. Had it been unlocked? Or did he have a key? "Mrs. Montgomery," the fake detective said, his voice cold against my ear, "we're going to have a little chat about your husband's accounts. And if you're smart, you'll tell me exactly what I want to know." I bit down hard on his hand. He yelped, loosening his grip just enough for me to twist away. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove, and swung it with all my might. It connected with his head with a sickening thud. He staggered back, blood streaming from a gash above his eye, then collapsed onto my kitchen floor. I stood there, breathing hard, the skillet still clutched in my trembling hands. Had I killed him? Was he just unconscious? I couldn't tell, and I wasn't about to check. I grabbed my phone from where it had landed and ran out the back door, not stopping until I reached my neighbor's house. Mrs. Patel, a kind widow in her 70s, took one look at my terrified face and ushered me inside, locking the door behind us. "Call the police," I gasped. "There's a man in my house." He tried to attack me. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Mrs. Patel made me tea I couldn't drink, my hands shaking too badly to hold the cup. I gave her a sanitized version of what had happened, leaving out the parts about offshore accounts and Harold's mistress. The police arrived, surrounding my house with guns drawn. But when they entered, they found no one. The fake detective was gone, leaving behind only bloodstains on my kitchen floor as evidence he'd ever been there. I described him to the real police officers who took my statement, but without knowing his true identity, there wasn't much they could do. They agreed to patrol the area more frequently and suggested I stay elsewhere for a few days. "Do you have somewhere you can go?" the female officer asked kindly. "Family? Friends." I thought of my children, both living out of state with families of their own. I could call them, but then I'd have to explain everything: Harold's affair, the financial irregularities, the threats. They'd already lost their father. I couldn't bear to tarnish their memories of him any further. Yes, I lied again. "I'll be fine." After the police left, Mrs. Patel insisted I stay with her for the night. I accepted gratefully, though I knew it was only a temporary solution. As I lay awake on her floral-patterned sofa, I realized that the quiet life I'd known was over. Harold's death had set in motion events I couldn't control, drawing me into a dangerous world of financial fraud and violent threats. But strangely, amid the fear and uncertainty, I felt something else, a growing sense of my own strength. I had faced Harold's betrayal, Veronica's taunts, and now a physical attack, and I was still standing. Tomorrow I would call James. We would figure out what to do about the offshore accounts, about Veronica or Victoria, or whatever her name really was. I would learn what Harold had been hiding, and I would protect myself and my family's legacy. The fake detective had asked about Harold's accounts. Not the legitimate ones that had been mentioned in the will, but the hidden ones. How did he know about those? The most likely answer was Veronica. She had sent him to extract information from me, perhaps believing I knew passwords or account numbers that she needed. Which meant she didn't have complete access to the money after all. There was something missing, something she needed from me. And that gave me leverage. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I was done being reactive, done hiding and running. It was time to take control of this situation. Time to find out exactly what Harold had been involved in and what Veronica's role had been. I would confront her directly. But first, I needed insurance, something that would protect me if things went wrong. And I knew exactly where to start looking. With new determination, I reached for my phone and sent a text to James. "I need to get into Harold's office again. Today. And bring your PI. We're going hunting." James's voice on the other end of the line was tense. "Margaret, after what happened last night, I don't think—" "James," I cut him off, my voice steadier than it had been in days. "I'm tired of being in the dark. Harold kept me there for years. I won't stay there anymore. I need to know what I'm dealing with, and I need to know now." There was a pause, then a sigh of resignation. "I'll pick you up in an hour. But promise me you won't do anything reckless." I thought of the cast iron skillet, the feeling of it connecting with a fake detective skull. I'll do whatever it takes to protect myself, I said simply, and hung up. An hour later, James's car pulled up outside Mrs. Patel's house. Beside him in the passenger seat was a man I didn't recognize, presumably the private investigator. "Margaret, this is Ray Donovan." James introduced us as I slid into the back seat. "He's been looking into Veronica Chambers, or Victoria Chamberlain, rather." Ray turned to face me, extending a hand. He was older than I expected, maybe in his 60s, with weathered skin and sharp, observant eyes. "Mrs. Montgomery, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." I shook his hand, noting his firm grip. "So do I, Mr. Donovan. What have you found out about her?" As James navigated through morning traffic toward Harold's office downtown, Ray filled me in on what he discovered about Victoria Chamberlain, the woman I knew as Veronica Chambers. "She's what we in the business call a black widow," Ray explained, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes. "Not in the sense that she kills her men, at least not directly, but she finds wealthy, usually married men, becomes their mistress, and then somehow ends up with their money." "How many times has she done this?" I asked, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. "That I can confirm?" "3 times before your husband. First was a real estate developer in Miami, 15 years ago. Then a hedge fund manager in Boston. Most recently, an oil executive in Houston. Each time, the man dies, heart attack, stroke, car accident, and within months, she's moved on with a sizable portion of his fortune." "But how? If they were married, like Harold was to me, wouldn't their wives inherit everything?" Ray exchanged a glance with James in the rearview mirror. "That's the interesting part. In each case, large sums of money were moved offshore shortly before death. Money that was never part of the official estate, never mentioned in the will. So she helps them hide money from their wives, then takes it after they die." I said, the pieces fitting together in my mind.
"Exactly.
"And she's good at covering her tracks. Changes her name slightly each time, moves to a new city. By the time anyone connects the dots, she's long gone." I thought about Harold, about how easily he'd been seduced by this woman. Had he known about her past? Or had he been just another gullible mark, flattered by the attention of a beautiful younger woman? "The man who broke into my house last night," I said. "Could he be working with her?" Ray nodded. "Almost certainly. In previous cases, she's been known to employ muscle when necessary. Usually ex-military or ex-cops who've gone bad. They know how to intimidate without leaving evidence." "What do they want from me?" "If she already has access to Harold's hidden accounts." "That's just it," James interrupted, pulling into the parking garage beneath Harold's office building. "I don't think she does have complete access. At least, not yet. There must be something, a password, an account number, a verification process, that she still needs. And she thinks I have it." I finished the thought. "But I don't. Harold never told me anything about his finances." "Maybe not directly," Ray said, turning to face me again. "But he might have left clues, information hidden where only you would find it. Men like Harold, they often develop a conscience toward the end, especially if they suspect their mistress isn't as devoted as she pretends to be." The thought sent a chill through me. Had Harold suspected Victoria's true nature? Is that why he'd changed his will, ensuring everything official went to me? Had he been trying, in his own inadequate way, to protect me? James parked the car, and we took the elevator up to Harold's floor. The office was quiet. It was Saturday, and most employees were off. Patricia, Harold's executive assistant, was waiting for us as arranged, looking professional as always in a crisp blouse and pencil skirt. "Mrs. Montgomery," she greeted me with a nod. "Mr. Harrington." And, "This is Mr. Donovan, a security consultant," James said smoothly. "In light of recent events, he's helping us ensure Mrs. Montgomery's safety." Patricia's eyes widened slightly. "I heard about the break-in. Are you all right, Mrs. Montgomery?" "I'm fine. Thank you, Patricia," I said, touched by her concern. "But I need to go through Harold's office thoroughly. There may be information there that could explain what's happening." Patricia unlocked Harold's office door for us. "Take all the time you need. I'll be at my desk if you require anything. Once we were alone in Harold's office, Ray immediately began a systematic search, checking for hidden compartments in the desk, examining the frames of artwork on the walls, running his hands along the underside of shelves. What exactly are we looking for? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the task. Harold had been meticulous to the point of obsession in his work life. His office was immaculate, everything labeled and filed with precision. Anything out of place, Ray answered, not pausing in his search. Something that wouldn't make sense to anyone but you. A reference to a special date, a place that was meaningful to the two of you, a private joke. I frowned, trying to think. Harold and I had grown apart over the years. Our inside jokes had faded, our special places forgotten as he became more consumed by work and, apparently, his mistress. I opened his desk drawers, going through files and folders. Everything was business-related, contracts, proposals, financial statements. Nothing personal, nothing that screamed secret or hidden money. Then I noticed something odd. In his calendar, certain dates were marked with a small red in the corner. No explanation, no notes, just the red. I flipped back through the previous months. The pattern seemed random at first, but then I realized the marked dates were always Thursdays. James, I called. What day of the week did Harold die? James thought for a moment. Tuesday, April 15th. I shook my head. So, these Thursday meetings, they weren't with her? Not necessarily, Ray said, coming to look over my shoulder at the calendar. He might have been meeting with someone else connected to the offshore accounts. A banker, a financial advisor, someone who helped him move the money. I continued looking through the desk while Ray examined Harold's computer. The password stumped him. He tried the obvious ones, our anniversary, our children's birth dates, combinations of names and numbers. Nothing, he said with frustration. He was careful. I looked at the computer screen, at the blinking cursor in the password field. What would Harold have used? Something he wouldn't forget, but also something not immediately obvious to others. A memory surfaced, Harold and me, 25 years ago, on our 5th wedding anniversary. We couldn't afford much, just a weekend at a small bed and breakfast in Vermont. It had rained the entire time, forcing us to stay indoors. We'd played board games, read books, made love. On the last night, slightly drunk on cheap wine, Harold had looked at me with such tenderness and said, "Rain or shine, Maggie, you're my constant." Rain or shine, I typed into the password field. Nothing. I tried variations, rain shine, rain and shine, rain_shine. The screen remained locked. I sat back, frustrated. Had I imagined that the moment had meant as much to Harold as it had to me? Probably. The man who had shared his bed with Victoria Chamberlain was not the same young husband who had held me close in that Vermont B&B. Then another thought struck me. Harold had called me Maggie back then. He'd stopped using the nickname years ago, reverting to the more formal Margaret as our marriage cooled. I typed in rain or shine Maggie. The screen unlocked. "I'm in," I said, surprised and oddly moved. Despite everything, some part of Harold had remembered, had held on to that younger version of us. Ray quickly took over, his fingers moving rapidly over the keyboard as he searched through Harold's files. Emails, documents, financial records, there's a lot here. This could take hours to go through properly. Look for anything related to the Cayman Islands, James suggested, peering over Ray's shoulder. Or any correspondence with someone named Victoria or Veronica. I left them to it, continuing my own search of the physical office. Something about those red dots in the calendar nagged at me. I checked Harold's address book, flipping to the back where he kept notes on regular meeting spots, restaurants, golf clubs, conference centers. And there it was. Thursday Club, RH, 2 p.m., followed by an address I didn't recognize in an industrial part of town. "I think I found something," I said, showing the address to Ray and James. He had regular Thursday meetings at this location. Ray frowned, typing the address into his phone. "That's not a business district. It's mostly warehouses, small manufacturing companies." "Could it be a front for something else?" I asked. "A place to meet whoever was helping him move the money?" "Possibly." Ray stood up. I think we should check it out. But not all of us. Mrs. Montgomery, you should go home with James. I'll reconnoiter the location and report back. No, I said firmly, surprising both men and myself. I'm coming with you. Whatever Harold was involved in, it's affected my life, is still affecting my life. I need to see for myself. Ray opened his mouth to argue, but James interrupted. She's right, Ray. Besides, we don't know what we're looking for. Margaret might recognize something we'd miss. After a moment, Ray nodded reluctantly.
Fine.
But you stay in the car unless I determine it's safe. Deal? Deal. I agreed, though I had no intention of sitting on the sidelines if we found something important. We left Patricia with instructions to call us if anyone came looking for Harold's files, then headed back to the parking garage. This time, we took Ray's car, an unremarkable gray sedan that wouldn't attract attention. As we drove across town, I found myself thinking about Harold in a way I hadn't since his death. Not as the unfaithful husband or the financial fraudster, but as the complex, flawed human being he'd been. What had driven him to risk everything, his marriage, his reputation, possibly even his freedom, for money he was hiding offshore and a relationship with a woman who almost certainly didn't love him? Had he been unhappy with me? With our life together? We'd had a good marriage once, I was sure of it. When had things changed? When had I become invisible to him? The industrial district was as depressing as I'd imagined. Concrete buildings with peeling paint, chain-link fences topped with barbed wire, empty loading docks. Ray drove slowly, checking addresses until we found the one from Harold's address book. RH Importing. Ray read from a small sign beside a roll-up garage door. Looks like a legitimate business, at least on the surface. He parked across the street, instructing us to wait while he did a preliminary check. James and I watched as he approached the building casually, as if he belonged there. He peered through windows, tested a side door, then returned to the car. Place looks closed today, but there's definitely activity inside during the week. Recent tire tracks, fresh cigarette butts by the door. He glanced at his watch. It's almost 2 now. If this Thursday club still meets without Harold, someone might show up soon. We didn't have to wait long. At 5 minutes to 2, a black Lexus pulled up to the building. A man in an expensive suit got out, looked around warily, then used a key to enter through the side door. Do you recognize him? Ray asked me. I strained to see. I think, yes, that's Roger Kenton, one of Harold's business partners. He was at the will reading. 10 minutes later, another car arrived. This time, I definitely recognized the occupant. Veronica, or Victoria, stepping out in high heels and a tight dress, her blonde hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. My heart raced. That's her. That's Veronica. Ray snapped several photos with his phone. Interesting. So she and Roger Kenton are still meeting, even after Harold's death. They must be partners, James said grimly, in whatever financial scheme Harold was running. I felt sick. How deep did this go? How many of Harold's associates were involved? And what would they do to protect their secret? 3 more cars arrived over the next 20 minutes. I recognized 2 of the men, both investors in Harold's company. The third was a stranger, a severe-looking man with a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. That, Ray said, zooming in with his phone camera, looks like a professional courier, probably carrying documents, possibly cash. We need to know what they're discussing in there, James said, frustration evident in his voice. Ray thought for a moment. There might be a way. If I can get close enough to a window. He reached into his glove compartment and pulled out what looked like a small satellite dish with a wire attached to a headset. Parabolic microphone. It can pick up conversations through glass if I get the angle right. That's eavesdropping, James said, looking uncomfortable. It could be inadmissible in court. We're not gathering evidence for court yet, Ray interrupted. We're trying to figure out what we're dealing with. What would you prefer? That Mrs. Montgomery continues to be threatened by people breaking into her home. James conceded with a reluctant nod. Stay here, Ray instructed, getting out of the car with his equipment. Lock the doors. If anyone approaches the car, drive away immediately. We watched as Ray crossed the street, moving carefully to avoid being seen from the building's windows. He positioned himself behind a dumpster, aiming his parabolic microphone at a window near the side door. Minutes ticked by. I found myself holding my breath, afraid for Ray's safety, afraid of what he might hear. What if Harold had been involved in something worse than financial fraud? What if these people were dangerous, truly dangerous? Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Ray returned to the car, his expression grim. "What did you hear?" I asked as soon as he was inside. "Enough to know we're in over our heads," he said, starting the engine and pulling away quickly. "They're discussing the offshore accounts, specifically how to access them now that Harold is gone." "Did they mention me?" I asked. Ray nodded, not taking his eyes off the road. Veronica, Victoria, was upset that the message they sent last night didn't yield results. Roger assured her they'd find another way to get the information they need. "What information?" James asked. Apparently, Harold changed the access protocols for the main Cayman account shortly before his death. Added some kind of secondary authentication that only he knew. Ray glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "They think he told you, or left the information where you'd find it." I shook my head in disbelief. "But he didn't. I've found nothing." "They don't believe that. And they're getting desperate. The banker, the guy with the briefcase, said they have until the end of the month before the accounts are frozen pending an international audit. Something about new banking regulations." James let out a low whistle. "So they need to empty those accounts within, 2 weeks? And they think Margaret is the key." "Exactly. And they're willing to go to extreme lengths to get what they need." Ray's voice was deadly serious. "Mrs. Montgomery, I don't think it's safe for you to go home. Not now, not until this is resolved." Fear gripped me again, but alongside it was a burning anger. These people, Harold's business partners, his mistress, had been stealing, lying, betraying. And now they thought they could threaten me, force me to give them something I didn't even have? "I'm not going into hiding," I said firmly. "This is my life they're trying to destroy. I won't run from it." "Margaret," James began, his tone placating. "Ray's right. These people are dangerous." "I know they're dangerous," I snapped. "The man who broke into my house last night made that perfectly clear. But running won't solve anything. They'll just keep looking for me." "Then what do you suggest?" Ray asked, sounding genuinely curious rather than dismissive. An idea was forming in my mind, a risky, possibly foolish idea, but one that might just work. "We give them what they want," I said slowly. "Or rather, we let them think I'm going to give them what they want." "A trap," Ray said, a note of approval in his voice. "Exactly. We contact Veronica, Victoria, and tell her I've found Harold's information. That I'm willing to make a deal. Access to the accounts in exchange for her leaving me alone, disappearing from my life forever." "She'll never believe you'd just hand it over," James objected. "She will if I convince her I want nothing to do with money that was obtained illegally. That I'm afraid of being implicated if the authorities investigate." I leaned forward. "We set up a meeting. Somewhere public, but not too public. Somewhere we can control." Ray was nodding slowly. "It could work. We'd need to wire you, have backup nearby." "And what happens when she realizes you don't actually have the information?" James asked, still skeptical. "By then, it'll be too late," I said, surprising myself with my confidence. "We'll have recorded her admitting to the scheme, implicating Roger and the others. Enough evidence to go to the authorities." "It's risky," Ray warned. "These people have already shown they're willing to use violence." "Everything is risky at this point," I countered. "At least this way, we're taking control of the situation instead of waiting for them to make the next move." After further discussion, Ray and James reluctantly agreed to my plan. We would set up a meeting with Victoria for the next day, Sunday, when there would be fewer people around to potentially get hurt if things went wrong. The location, a small cafe near the waterfront that Ray knew well. It had a back room that could be reserved for private meetings, with exits Ray could monitor, and good sight lines from adjacent buildings where he could position additional security. The bait: I would claim to have found a safety deposit box key and instructions from Harold, hidden in a place only I would think to look. The trap: Ray would wire me for sound, recording everything Victoria said. He would also position 2 of his associates nearby, former law enforcement officers he trusted, ready to intervene if necessary. But what if she brings backup? James worried as Ray drove us back to his office to finalize the details. That man who broke into your house, or others like him? She won't, I said with more certainty than I felt. She'll want to handle this personally. It's too important to delegate. Mrs. Montgomery's right, Ray agreed. From what I've learned about Victoria Chamberlain, she likes to maintain direct control over the final stages of her operations. It's why she's never been caught. She doesn't leave loose ends. I felt a chill at his words. Harold had been a loose end, hadn't he? A man who had outlived his usefulness in Victoria's scheme. Had his heart attack really been natural? I pushed the thought away. There was no evidence of foul play in Harold's death. The autopsy had found nothing suspicious. He'd had a history of heart problems. It was terrible enough to know he'd betrayed me with another woman, that he'd been involved in financial fraud. I couldn't bear to consider that his death might have been anything but natural. We spent the rest of the afternoon at Ray's office, a sparse but functional space above a dry cleaner's. He walked me through how the wire would work, how to guide the conversation to ensure Victoria incriminated herself, what signals to use if I felt threatened and needed to abort the meeting. By the time we finished, it was early evening. The question of where I would stay that night hung in the air. My house wasn't safe. The fake detective had proven that, and I didn't want to impose on Mrs. Patel again. I have a safe house, Ray offered. Nothing fancy but secure. No one would connect it to you. I was about to accept when my phone rang. An unknown number. I showed it to Ray, who nodded for me to answer, but gestured for me to put it on speaker. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Margaret. Victoria's voice, smooth as silk and twice as cold. I think it's time we had a proper conversation, don't you? My heart hammered in my chest. How had she gotten my number? Then I realized Harold's phone. She probably had access to his contacts. Victoria, I said, using her real name deliberately. Or, do you prefer Veronica? There was a slight pause, then a soft laugh. I see you've been doing your homework. Good for you. Then you know this isn't my first rodeo. I know you're trying to access money that Harold hid offshore. Money that belongs to his company, his investors. Money that he promised to me, she corrected, her voice hardening. For services rendered. The crude implication made my skin crawl. What do you want? The same thing my associate wanted when he visited your home last night, before you so rudely incapacitated him. Another cold laugh. You're full of surprises, Margaret. I can see why Harold married you. There's more steel in you than meets the eye. Get to the point, I said, Ray nodding encouragingly beside me. The point is, Harold changed the access protocols for our accounts shortly before his inconvenient departure from this world. He added some kind of personal verification that only he knew. We believe he left that information with you, or somewhere you would find it. And if he did? I asked, following the script Ray and I had prepared. What's in it for me? Your continued good health, she said simply. And the knowledge that this whole messy business will disappear from your life forever. I'll take the money and go, somewhere far away, somewhere you'll never have to see me again. How do I know I can trust you? Victoria laughed again, a sound like breaking glass. You can't. But what choice do you have? Those accounts will be frozen soon. Once that happens, there will be investigations, questions asked. Your name will be dragged into it. Harold's reputation destroyed. Is that what you want? To spend your golden years visiting your husband's memory in a prison cemetery? I took a deep breath. I may have found something. A key, instructions. I'm still trying to make sense of it all. Where? She demanded, an edge of desperation breaking through her controlled facade. Where did you find it? I'm not discussing that over the phone, I said firmly. If you want what I have, we meet. Face to face. Just you and me. There was a long pause. I could almost hear her calculating, weighing the risks against the potential reward. Fine, she said finally. Where and when? I gave her the details of the cafe Ray had suggested, saying I'd meet her there at noon the next day. Come alone, I added. If I see anyone with you, if I sense any kind of trap, I'll destroy what I've found. You'll never see a penny of that money. You've developed quite the backbone, Margaret, Victoria said, sounding almost impressed. Harold always described you as such a doormat. I see now he didn't know you very well. The casual cruelty of her words stung, but I didn't let it show in my voice. People change when they have to. Noon tomorrow. Don't be late. I hung up before she could respond, my hand trembling slightly as I set the phone down. You did well, Ray said, genuine approval in his voice. She bought it. Now, we just need to prepare for tomorrow. James looked concerned. This is happening very fast. Maybe we should reconsider, take more time to plan. We don't have more time, I reminded him. She said herself the accounts will be frozen soon. This may be our only chance to catch her, to get evidence of what she and the others have been doing. What I didn't say, what I could barely admit to myself, was that I wanted this over with. I wanted to face this woman who had helped destroy my marriage, who had conspired with my husband to steal and lie. I wanted to look her in the eye and let her see that she hadn't broken me, that despite everything, I was still standing. That night, I stayed at Ray's safe house, a small, sparsely furnished apartment above a hardware store in a quiet neighborhood. The bed was uncomfortable, the water pressure in the shower barely more than a trickle, but it was secure. Ray stayed in the living room, keeping watch, while I tried to sleep in the bedroom. Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harold's face, then Victoria's, then the fake detective's. I replayed the confrontation to come over and over in my mind, imagining what I would say, how Victoria might respond. What could go wrong? By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. Ray made coffee on a hot plate, strong and bitter, just what I needed. James arrived at 9, bringing fresh clothes for me that he'd picked up from my house under Ray's instructions. We went over the plan again. The wire, the signals, the backup. Everything methodical, everything planned. Ray's calm professionalism steadied my nerves. At 11, we drove to the cafe. Ray went in first to check that everything was as expected. The back room was ready, a small private space with a table for two, and a server, who would only appear when called. James would wait in the main cafe area, pretending to be an ordinary customer. Ray's two associates, Mike and Derek, both former cops with a build to prove it, would be positioned outside, one watching the front entrance, one covering the back. I waited in Ray's car while he rigged the wire, a small microphone taped to my skin, the transmitter hidden in my bra. He tested it, having me speak while he listened through an earpiece. Crystal clear, he confirmed. Remember, keep her talking about the offshore accounts, about Harold's involvement, about her role in it all. The more specific she gets, the better. I nodded, my mouth dry with nervousness. And if something goes wrong, use the code word, headache. Say you're getting a headache, and we'll intervene immediately. Ray put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. But nothing will go wrong. You'll be surrounded by professionals. Victoria won't try anything in a public place. At 11:45, I entered the cafe. The front area was busy with Sunday brunchers, families and couples enjoying late breakfast. James was already seated at a corner table, pretending to read a newspaper. He gave me the slightest of nods as I passed. The hostess led me to the back room. It was small but not claustrophobic, with a window overlooking an alley where Derek was positioned, though I couldn't see him from inside. The table was set for two, with water glasses and menus. I sat facing the door, as Ray had instructed, and I waited. Noon came and went. 5 minutes. 10. My nerves stretched tighter with each passing moment. Had Victoria seen through our plan? Had she sent someone to watch the cafe, spotted Ray or the others? Then, at 12:15, the door opened. And there she was. Victoria Chamberlain, the woman I knew as Veronica Chambers, stood in the doorway, as poised and elegant as she'd been at Harold's funeral. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her makeup flawless. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my car, and heels that clicked ominously on the hardwood floor as she approached. "Margaret," she said, her voice cool. "How punctual of you. Sorry to keep you waiting." She sat across from me, setting her designer handbag on the table between us. A calculated move, I realized. The bag partially blocked her face from the window, making it harder for Derek to see her expressions. "Let's not waste time," I said, trying to channel the confidence I'd felt on the phone. "We both know why we're here." Victoria smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. "Indeed. You have something I want. The question is, do you really understand what you've found?" This was it, the moment to play my hand, to convince her I truly had what she needed. "A safe deposit box key," I said, watching her face carefully. "And a letter from Harold, explaining how to use it to access the Cayman accounts." He didn't trust digital records for this, apparently. Her eyes narrowed, assessing me. "Where did you find this?" "In a place only I would look," I said vaguely. "A place connected to our past, to a time before everything changed." "How sentimental of Harold," she said with a smirk. "I wouldn't have thought him capable." "There was more to my husband than you knew," I said, surprising myself with the protective edge in my voice. Despite everything, some part of me still wanted to defend Harold, to believe there had been good in him. Victoria leaned forward, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping the table impatiently.
"The key."
"Do you have it with you?" "Not here," I lied. "It's in a secure location." "I'm not stupid, Victoria." "No," she conceded, "you're not. Which makes me wonder why you'd agree to this meeting at all. What do you really want, Margaret?" "Exactly what I said on the phone. For this to be over. For you to take the money and disappear from my life forever." I leaned forward, mirroring her posture. "But I need guarantees. I need to know that once I give you what you want, you and your associates will leave me alone." She raised an eyebrow. "My associates?" "Roger Kenton," I said, watching her face carefully. "The others from the Thursday Club. The man who broke into my house. I want assurances from all of them." For a moment, Victoria looked genuinely surprised. Then she laughed, a cold, brittle sound.
Well.
"You have been busy. How did you find out about the Thursday Club?" "Harold kept records," I said simply. "I found them after he died." "And yet you claim you're not interested in the money yourself?" She looked skeptical. "Forgive me if I find that hard to believe. There's nearly $30 million in those accounts, Margaret. Enough to live like a queen for the rest of your life." The amount shocked me, though I tried not to show it. $30 million. Hidden away in offshore accounts while Harold and I lived modestly, while I budgeted for groceries and put off home repairs. The betrayal cut deep. "Money that was stolen," I said, my voice hardening. "Money that belongs to Harold's investors, his company. I want no part of it." "Such principles," Victoria mocked. "And yet here you are, negotiating with me instead of going to the authorities. Why is that, I wonder?" I'd anticipated this question. Because once this becomes official, everything comes out. Harold's fraud. His affair with you. All the sordid details splashed across the newspapers, his reputation destroyed. Our children would have to live with that legacy. She studied me for a long moment. "You're still protecting him, even after everything he did to you. How pathetic." The word struck like a physical blow. Pathetic. Is that how she saw me? Is that how Harold had seen me? A pathetic, dutiful wife, too blind or too spineless to question his late nights, his secretive phone calls, the growing distance between us? "No," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "Not protecting him. Protecting what's left of my family. My children don't deserve to have their father's crimes become public spectacle." Victoria seemed to consider this, drumming her fingers on the table. "Let's say I believe you. How would this work? You give me the key and Harold's instructions, and I just walk away. You take the key. You access the accounts and transfer the money wherever you want it. And then you disappear. You never contact me again. You never come back to the city." I leaned forward. "And you call off your attack dog, the man who broke into my house. I want guarantees that he won't try again." "Oh, Davis," she said casually.
"Don't worry about him.
He's nursing a nasty headache thanks to you and your, what was it?"
A frying pan."
"Cast iron skillet," I corrected, a small surge of satisfaction running through me at the memory. Victoria actually smiled at that, a genuine smile that transformed her face for a moment. I underestimated you, Margaret. We all did. Harold always described you as so conventional, boring even. The casual cruelty of her words stung, but I pushed past it. When can I expect your associates to agree to this arrangement? She waved a dismissive hand. They'll do as I say. I'm the one with the connections to move the money once we access it. Without me, they're just middle-aged men with gambling debts and trophy wives to support. And Roger? I pressed. Harold's partner? He seemed quite involved yesterday at your meeting. Victoria's eyes narrowed at my specific knowledge. You've been watching us. How resourceful of you. Answer the question, I said firmly. Will Roger agree to leave me alone? She considered for a moment. Roger is complicated. He and Harold had other business arrangements beyond the Cayman accounts. Things you might not know about. What things? I asked, genuinely curious now. Victoria studied me, as if deciding how much to reveal. Let's just say that Harold's company wasn't as legitimate as its fancy downtown address would suggest. Some of their investments were creative. Money laundering, I guessed, remembering James's concerns about the irregularities in Harold's business. Among other things.
Victoria shrugged elegantly.
The point is, Roger has his own problems to worry about. Once the money is secured, he'll have no reason to concern himself with you. I took a deep breath. Now came the crucial part, getting her to explicitly acknowledge her role in the scheme. How long were you and Harold planning this? I asked, keeping my voice steady. The offshore accounts, the hidden money, was it from the beginning, or did that come later? Victoria tilted her head, considering how much to reveal. Harold and I met 3 years ago at a charity function. Your husband was immediately receptive to my attention. She smiled, clearly enjoying the pain her words caused me. The financial arrangements came later, after I'd gained his trust. And the other men? The ones before Harold? Did you follow the same pattern with them? Her eyes narrowed. You've been thorough in your research. I'm impressed. Answer the question. I pressed, needing her to incriminate herself for Ray's recording. Business is business, she said with a shrug. I provide a service, companionship, discretion, expertise in certain financial matters. In return, I receive compensation. She leaned forward. You can judge me all you want, Margaret, but ask yourself this. Who's really to blame? The woman who offers an opportunity, or the husband who chooses to take it? Both, I said firmly. You both betrayed me. The difference is Harold is dead. You're still here, threatening me, sending men to break into my home. A regrettable necessity, she said coolly. Davis got overzealous. That wasn't my intention. What was your intention? For him to politely ask me for the key to $30 million. I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my voice. Victoria sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. Time is running out, Margaret. The banking regulations change at the end of the month. After that, those accounts will be frozen pending international review. All that money gone. Is that what you want? To spite me at the cost of your own future security? I told you I don't want the money. Everyone wants money, she countered. It's just a question of price. What's yours, Margaret? What would it take for you to hand over that key right now? 5 million? 10? Name your figure. I realized she was trying to turn the tables, to make this a negotiation rather than a confession. I needed to steer the conversation back. Let's be clear about something, I said, leaning forward. You helped my husband steal money from his investors. You set up the offshore accounts, arranged the transfers, created the shell companies. That makes you an accomplice to fraud, possibly money laundering. If I wanted to, I could take what I found to the FBI instead of to you. Fear flashed briefly in her eyes before she controlled it. But you won't. For the same reasons you just gave, to protect your family, your children, Harold's memory. Maybe, I conceded. Or maybe I'm just trying to decide which option benefits me more. Working with you, or working with the authorities. Victoria studied me for a long moment. You're bluffing. You don't have the stomach for this kind of hardball. 3 days ago, I hit a man in the head with a cast iron skillet when he broke into my home. I reminded her, "Don't presume to know what I'm capable of now." That gave her pause. Good. Let her wonder, let her worry that the doormat wife had found her spine. Fine, she said finally. Let's cut to the chase. You want guarantees. I want the key and Harold's instructions. How do we proceed? First, I need to hear you say it. I pressed. All of it. Your role, Harold's role, Roger's role. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with before I hand over anything. Victoria rolled her eyes. Is this really necessary? We both know what happened. Humor me, I insisted. Consider it the price of my cooperation. She sighed dramatically.
Fine.
3 years ago, I approached Harold with a proposition. He had money he wanted to shield from taxes and other obligations.
A pointed look at me.
I had the connections to make that happen. We set up accounts in the Cayman Islands, created shell companies to funnel the money through. Roger helped with the paperwork, making everything look legitimate on the company's end. And the Thursday Club? I prompted. A regular meeting to coordinate our efforts. We needed multiple people, bankers, attorneys, financial advisors, to make the scheme work. Harold insisted on handling the final verification process himself.
Paranoid, really.
He added that extra layer of security just a month before he died. She leaned forward. That's what I need from you. Whatever he left that gives access to those final accounts. I nodded slowly, as if considering her words. Inside, I was elated. She'd just confessed to financial fraud on Ray's recording. But I needed more. I needed her to implicate herself in the threat against me as well. And the man who broke into my house? Davis, you called him. Victoria waved a dismissive hand. A former police officer with financial problems. Easily manipulated. I needed someone to search your house while you were out, but you came home unexpectedly. He panicked. He threatened me. I reminded her. Pretended to be a detective investigating Harold's death. An improvisation on his part. Clumsy, but effective enough to scare you. She smiled coldly. Until you introduced him to your kitchenware. I took a deep breath. And if I give you what you want today, Davis backs off? Everyone backs off? I never see any of you again. Precisely, Victoria said smoothly. You give me the key and Harold's instructions. I access the money. And we all go our separate ways. You can return to your, what was it you did again? Garden club? Book club? Whatever thrilling activities fill your days. The condescension in her voice made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. And how do I know you won't come back later? Demanding more. Maybe Harold left other secrets you don't know about yet. Trust works both ways, Margaret, she said with false sweetness. I'm trusting that you actually have what I need. You need to trust that once I have it, I'll disappear. $30 million is more than enough to start a new life far from here. I pretended to consider her words, though my mind was already made up. Ray had what he needed, Victoria's explicit confession about the fraud scheme and her connection to the man who broke into my home. Now it was time to end this charade. I need to use the restroom, I said, standing up. When I return, we can finalize our arrangement. Victoria looked suspicious. Planning to run? I smiled thinly. With you and your associates watching the building?
Hardly.
I just need a moment to collect my thoughts. This isn't exactly an everyday transaction for me. She nodded reluctantly.
Fine.
5 minutes. Then I expect your decision. I walked out of the private room, through the main cafe area where James still sat with his newspaper, and into the hallway leading to the restrooms. Ray was waiting there as planned. Did you get it all? I whispered. He nodded, his expression serious but satisfied. Every word. She confessed to financial fraud, setting up the offshore accounts, and sending Davis to your home. It's more than enough. What now? I asked. Now we bring in the authorities, Ray said. I have a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We turn over the recording, they take it from there. And Victoria? The others? What happens in the meantime? Ray hesitated. That's the tricky part. Once they know we've recorded them, they'll be desperate. Possibly dangerous. We need to move quickly, get you somewhere safe until arrests can be made.
I thought about that.
About running, hiding, waiting for the slow wheels of justice to turn. About Victoria and Roger, and the others possibly finding ways to escape, to cover their tracks, to harm me or my family. No, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. I'm done hiding. I want to end this now. Ray frowned. What are you suggesting? I'm going back in there, I said, a plan forming in my mind. I'm going to tell Victoria. I'll give her what she wants. But on my terms. Mrs. Montgomery, Margaret, that's too risky. She's dangerous, especially if she thinks she's about to get what she wants. She won't hurt me in a public place, I reminded him. And I won't actually give her anything valuable. Just enough to keep her on the hook until your FBI contact can take over. Ray still looked unconvinced, but something in my expression must have told him I wouldn't be dissuaded. What do you need me to do? Call your FBI contact.
Now.
Tell them everything. Then have Derek and Mike move closer, just in case. And I hesitated. I need to borrow your phone. 5 minutes later, I walked back into the private room where Victoria waited, impatience written across her perfect features.
Finally, she said.
I was beginning to think you'd climbed out a bathroom window. I needed time to think, I said, sitting down across from her again. And I've made my decision. Victoria leaned forward expectantly. And I'll give you what you want, I said slowly. The key, Harold's instructions. Everything you need to access the accounts. Relief washed across her face, quickly replaced by suspicion. Just like that? No more conditions, no more questions. Just one condition, I said firmly. We do the exchange my way, on my terms. Her eyes narrowed. Explain. Not here. Too public, too many eyes. I took a deep breath. We meet tonight. At my house. 8 o'clock. Your house. Victoria looked skeptical. Why there? Because that's where I've hidden Harold's instructions. I lied smoothly. In a place only I can access. I'm not carrying $30 million worth of information around in my purse, Victoria. She studied me for a long moment, weighing her options. Who will be there? Just you and me, I promised. No Ray Donovan, no James Harrington. Just 2 women finishing a business transaction. How do I know this isn't a trap? She asked bluntly. I smiled, channeling some of her own cold confidence. Because, unlike you, I don't have a history of deception. I'm just a boring housewife, remember? Garden club and book club. The sarcasm wasn't lost on her.
Fine.
8 o'clock. But I'll have associates nearby, just in case you're feeling creative with that skillet again. I expected nothing less, I said, standing to leave. 8 o'clock. Don't be late. As I walked out of the cafe, past James, who would follow shortly, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time since Harold's death, I was taking control, setting the stage for what would come next. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Ray was waiting in his car around the corner. Well, he asked as I slid into the passenger seat. She'll be at my house at 8 tonight, I confirmed. Alone, though she'll have her people nearby. Margaret, Ray began, his voice concerned. I really don't think. It's the perfect solution, I interrupted. Your FBI contact can be waiting. When Victoria confesses again, which she will, she's too arrogant not to. They can arrest her on the spot. And if she brings Davis or other muscle with her? She won't, I said with confidence I didn't entirely feel. Victoria likes to handle the important things herself. Besides, she thinks I'm harmless. A pathetic, boring housewife. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Ray studied me for a moment. You're anything but harmless, Mrs. Montgomery. I think Victoria is about to learn that the hard way. Back at Ray's safe house, we finalized the plan. His FBI contact, a woman named Agent Rebecca Chin, would arrive at my house at 7, giving us time to wire the living room where I would meet with Victoria. 2 other agents would be positioned outside, ready to move in when given the signal. James arrived shortly after we did, looking worried as usual. This is moving too fast, he objected when we explained the plan. We should wait. Let the FBI build a proper case. With what evidence? I countered. Right now, all we have is a recording that might not even be admissible in court. We need Victoria to confess again, explicitly, in a controlled environment. Your house is hardly a controlled environment, James argued. What if she searches for recording devices? What if she brings that thug Davis with her? Then the FBI agents outside will handle it, Ray said firmly. Margaret's right, James. This is our best chance to catch Victoria and her associates. Once she realizes we're on to her, she'll disappear, taking whatever money she can access with her. James still looked unhappy, but he stopped arguing. At least let me be there too. As your attorney. I shook my head. Victoria specifically agreed to meet me alone. If she sees you there, she'll know something's wrong. I softened my tone. I appreciate your concern, James, truly. But I need to do this my way. You've changed, Margaret, he said quietly. In just a few days, you've become different. I've had to, I replied simply. The woman I was before Harold died couldn't have handled any of this. She would have crumbled under the pressure, the betrayal, the threats. That woman is gone. At 6:30, Ray drove me back to my house. It felt strange to return after the events of the past few days. The break-in, the discoveries about Harold, the confrontation with Victoria. The place didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage set, arranged for the final act of a play I never wanted to be in. Agent Chin was waiting for us, a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She reviewed the recording from the cafe meeting, her expression growing grimmer by the minute. This is excellent, she said when it finished. Clear evidence of conspiracy to commit financial fraud, admission of sending Davis to intimidate you. Combined with the financial records you found on your husband's computer, it's enough for search warrants, possibly arrests. But you want more, I guessed, seeing the calculation in her eyes. She nodded. A direct confession, in a controlled setting, would make the case airtight. Especially if she discusses specific accounts, amounts, who else was involved. That's what tonight is for, I said confidently. Agent Chin gave me a searching look. Mrs. Montgomery, I have to ask, why are you doing this? Most people in your position would just want to walk away. Let us handle it. I considered the question seriously. Why was I putting myself at risk? Why not just turn over what I knew and let the FBI take it from there? Because for 30 years, I lived in Harold's shadow. I said finally. I was his wife, his support, his accessory. When he died, I discovered he'd been lying to me for years. Cheating with Victoria, stealing from his investors, creating this whole secret life I knew nothing about. I took a deep breath. I need to be the one to end this. To look Victoria in the eye when she realizes it's over. I need that closure. Agent Chin nodded, understanding in her eyes. Just be careful. People like Victoria Chamberlain, they don't go down easily. When cornered, they lash out. I'll be ready, I promised. We spent the next hour preparing the living room. Small microphones hidden in strategic locations. A camera disguised as a clock on the mantelpiece. Agent Chun would be in the kitchen, just out of sight, but able to hear everything. The other agents would be outside, watching the perimeter. At 7:45, Ray reluctantly left, heading to a surveillance position across the street. He'd argued to stay in the house, but Agent Chun had overruled him. Too many people increased the risk of Victoria spotting something amiss. Then it was just me and Agent Chun, waiting in the quiet house. She checked her weapon one last time before taking her position in the kitchen. I sat in the living room, trying to calm my racing heart. Remember, Agent Chin said softly from the doorway, let her talk. The more she says, the stronger our case. If you feel threatened at any point, use the code word, headache, and we'll move in immediately. I nodded, too nervous now for words. The reality of what I was doing, confronting a woman who had stolen my husband, who might have been involved in financial crimes worth millions, who had sent a man to threaten me in my own home, was finally sinking in. At precisely 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and went to answer it. Victoria stood on my doorstep, as elegant and poised as ever in a simple black dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, her makeup perfect. She looked like she was arriving for a dinner party, not a criminal conspiracy. "Margaret," she said coolly, glancing past me into the house. "Are we alone?" As agreed. I confirmed, stepping back to let her enter.
Come in.
She walked into my home with the confidence of someone who belonged there, her high heels clicking on the hardwood floor as I led her to the living room. I noticed her eyes darting around, taking in details, perhaps looking for signs of a trap or for the mysterious key and instructions I'd promised. "Would you like a drink?" I offered, playing the role of hostess even as my heart hammered in my chest. "I have wine, or something stronger if you prefer." "Wine will be fine," she said, seating herself gracefully on my sofa, Harold's favorite spot, I noted with a flicker of irritation. I poured 2 glasses of red wine from a bottle I'd opened earlier, handing one to Victoria before taking the armchair opposite her. The distance between us felt both too great and not great enough. "Your home is exactly as I imagined it," Victoria said, glancing around with thinly veiled disdain. "So conventional. So safe." I refused to rise to the bait. "We're not here to discuss my decorating choices." "No," she agreed, taking a sip of wine. "We're here because you claim to have something I want. The question is, do you really have it, or is this some elaborate bluff?" "I have it," I said simply. "But before I hand it over, I need some answers. Real answers, not the sanitized version you gave me at the cafe."
Victoria sighed dramatically.
"More questions? I thought we were past that stage." "Think of it as my payment," I suggested. "You get $30 million. I get the truth. Seems like a fair exchange." She studied me over the rim of her wine glass. "What do you want to know?" "Start with Harold," I said, the name still difficult to say without emotion. "How did you really meet him? And don't say it was at a charity function." I checked our calendar for the past 3 years. Harold never attended charity events without me. Victoria smiled, a predatory curl of her perfect lips. "Clever. You're right, of course. We met at the Meridian. The hotel downtown?" I frowned, confused. "The bar at the Meridian," she clarified. "It's where I usually prospect. Business travelers, wealthy men away from home, looking for company. Harold was there with Roger, having drinks after work. I approached them, pretended to be a pharmaceutical sales rep in town for a conference." She shrugged elegantly. "Men like Harold are so predictable. Flash a smile, laugh at their jokes, show a little interest in their boring business talk." By the end of the evening, he was giving me his private number. Each word was like a knife, but I kept my expression neutral. "And you targeted him specifically?" "Because of his money." "Not initially," she admitted. "He was just another potential client. But when I discovered he owned his own company, had access to investment funds, well, let's just say my interest deepened." "And Roger? Was he part of your plan from the beginning?"
Victoria laughed.
"Roger was practically a matchmaker. He saw what was happening and encouraged it. I think he was living vicariously through Harold, to be honest, too afraid to cheat on his own wife, but happy to facilitate his friends' indiscretions." I filed that information away. Roger's involvement was deeper than I'd realized. "So you seduced my husband," I continued, keeping my voice steady. "When did the financial scheme begin?" Victoria settled back on the sofa, clearly enjoying the chance to boast about her manipulations. "About 6 months in. By then, Harold was besotted." She smiled coldly. "He'd tell you he was working late, then come to my apartment. Bring me gifts, take me to expensive restaurants in other cities where no one would recognize him. It was almost too easy." "And you suggested the offshore accounts?" I prompted. "Not directly. I mentioned a previous client who had protected his assets through Cayman accounts. Planted the seed. Harold was smart enough to see the potential. His company was doing well, but he was worried about taxes, about partners demanding larger shares. The usual concerns of the wealthy. So, you introduced him to your banking contacts, I guessed."
"Precisely."
"For a fee, of course." 20% of whatever was moved offshore. She took another sip of wine. Eventually, we developed a system. The Thursday Club, as you called it. Regular meetings to coordinate transfers, update paperwork, ensure everything appeared legitimate. And how much did you eventually move? I asked, hoping to get her to confirm the 30 million figure on record. Started small. A few $100,000. Eventually, over 3 years. She paused, as if calculating. Just over 32 million. Tax-free, untraceable dollars. She smiled. Until Harold complicated things. By changing the access protocols, I said. Victoria's expression darkened. A month before he died. No warning, no explanation. Suddenly, there was this new verification step, something only he could complete. When I confronted him, he said it was just an extra security measure. But I knew better. What do you mean? She studied me for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Your husband was planning to leave me, Margaret. Did you know that? He'd gotten sentimental.
Guilty.
Started talking about confessing everything, making amends. Her voice dripped with contempt, as if that would change anything, as if you would forgive him after learning what he'd done. My heart constricted painfully. Harold had wanted to confess? To make amends? Had his change of heart been real, or just another manipulation? He changed the access protocols to keep the money from you. I realized aloud. He was cutting you out. Trying to, Victoria corrected sharply. But he underestimated me. Always did. Thought I was just a pretty face, a convenient body. Never realized I was always 3 steps ahead of him. Until his heart attack, I said quietly. Something flickered across Victoria's perfect features. Caution, perhaps, or wariness. A tragedy, she said smoothly, but not entirely surprising, given his health history. Stress, poor diet, inadequate exercise. And yet the timing was convenient for you, I noted. Just when he was planning to cut you off, to possibly confess everything. Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. Be very careful, Margaret. You're implying something you can't possibly prove. I held her gaze steadily. I'm not implying anything, just noting the timing. Harold died of natural causes, she said firmly. The autopsy confirmed it. A heart attack, pure and simple. If you say so, I replied, letting doubt color my tone. In truth, I had no evidence that Harold's death had been anything but natural, but I wanted to rattle Victoria, to push her off balance. It worked. She set down her wineglass with a sharp click against the coffee table. Enough games. You claim to have the key and Harold's instructions. Where are they? Not so fast, I said, maintaining my composure. I need to know what happens after tonight. You take the money and disappear, fine. But what about Roger? The others involved? What guarantee do I have that they won't come after me once you're gone? Victoria waved a dismissive hand. Roger is a coward. Without me pushing him, he'll go back to his safe, boring life with his wife. The others, the bankers, the lawyers, they're just hired help. They have no personal stake in this. And Davis? I pressed. The man who broke into my house? A necessary evil, she said coldly. But once I have what I need, his services won't be required. He'll disappear back into whatever hole he crawled out of. I nodded slowly, as if considering her words. In reality, I was stalling, ensuring Agent Chen had enough of Victoria's confession recorded. You still haven't told me why I should trust you. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes intense. Because I'm a businesswoman, Margaret. This is a transaction. You give me what I want. I give you what you want, your life back, free from all of this ugliness. She gestured around, encompassing not just my home but the situation we found ourselves in. $32 million is more than enough incentive for me to honor my word. And yet you didn't honor your agreements with your previous clients, I countered. The men before Harold. You took their money and moved on. Surprise flashed across her face. You really have done your research. She recovered quickly, smiling that predatory smile again. Those were different circumstances. In each case, arrangements were made, agreements reached. If things ended messily, well, that wasn't my intention. And Harold? Was his death messy or convenient? Victoria's smile vanished. I've already told you, Harold died of natural causes. A heart attack. Nothing more. But if he had lived, I pressed, if he had cut you off from the money, confessed everything, what would you have done then? She was silent for a long moment, her eyes cold and calculating. Hypotheticals are pointless, Margaret. Harold is dead. The only question that matters now is whether you're going to give me what I came for, or if we need to resort to less pleasant methods of persuasion. The threat hung in the air between us. I felt a chill run down my spine, but forced myself to remain calm. Agent Chin was just a few steps away. Ray's associates were outside. I was safer than I'd been since this whole nightmare began. No need for threats, I said evenly. I told you, I want this over as much as you do. I stood up, moved to the bookshelf against the wall. Harold's instructions are here, hidden in plain sight, where only I would think to look. Victoria watched intently as I pulled down a photo album, our wedding album, dust gathering on its leather cover. I hadn't opened it in years. Neither had Harold, I suspected. Sentimental to the end, Victoria commented dryly. I opened the album to the middle, where I'd earlier planted an envelope. Inside was a key, a standard safe deposit box key I'd found in Harold's desk, and a handwritten note I'd created myself, with James's help, designed to look like Harold's handwriting. Victoria practically snatched them from me when I held them out. She examined the key first, turning it over in her manicured fingers, then unfolded the note. Her eyes narrowed as she read the fabricated instructions, a complex set of steps involving account numbers, passwords, and verification questions. All invented, all leading nowhere, but convincing enough to buy time for the FBI to build their case. "This is it?" she asked, looking up at me suspiciously. "This is what you've been holding back. Why didn't you just tell me this at the cafe? Would you have believed me if I'd just described it?" I countered. "You needed to see it, hold it in your hands." Victoria reread the note, her lips moving slightly as she processed the information. Some of these details, they match what I already know, but others... She looked up sharply. "How do I know this is real? That you haven't fabricated this to throw me off track?" I'd anticipated this question. "Test it," I suggested. "The first verification step can be done online right now. Use your phone." Victoria hesitated, then pulled a sleek smartphone from her purse. She carefully typed in the website address from the note, then the first account number and password we'd invented. I held my breath. James had assured me the fake account would appear to exist in the banking system. He'd set it up through contacts of his own, but would require additional verification steps to access fully. Enough to convince Victoria, at least temporarily. "It's working," she murmured, her focus entirely on the phone screen. "This first account, it's real, showing a balance of $5 million. She looked up at me, a mixture of triumph and lingering suspicion in her eyes. "But this is just the first layer. Harold mentioned multiple accounts, a total of 32 million. That's what the rest of the instructions are for," I said calmly. "The additional verification steps, the other account numbers. Everything you need." Victoria slipped the phone back into her purse, along with the key and note. "If you're playing me, Margaret..." "I'm not," I interrupted. "I want this over with. I want you gone from my life. Take the money, take your threats, take your associates, and disappear. That's all I ask." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You know, in another life, we might have been friends. You're smarter than Harold gave you credit for." "No," I said firmly. "In no life would we be friends. You helped my husband betray me, steal from his investors, lie to everyone who trusted him. You sent a man to threaten me in my own home. There is no world where I would call you friend." Victoria laughed, the sound cold and brittle in the quiet room. "Such righteousness. And yet here you are, helping me access stolen money instead of going to the authorities. What does that make you, Margaret?" "A survivor," I said simply. "Someone who's learned to make difficult choices." She smiled, a hint of genuine respect in her eyes. On that, at least, we can agree. She stood, smoothing her dress. I'll need time to complete these verification steps, access the remaining accounts. 24 hours should be sufficient. And then you'll be gone? I pressed. For good. For good, she confirmed. You'll never see me again. What about Roger? The others? I'll handle them, she promised. Once the money is secure, they'll have no reason to bother you. Their only concern is avoiding prosecution, and coming after Harold's widow would only draw unwanted attention. I nodded, rising to my feet as well. Then our business is concluded. Victoria extended her hand, a curiously formal gesture given the circumstances. Goodbye, Margaret. I'd say it's been a pleasure, but we both know that would be a lie. I hesitated, then shook her hand briefly. Her skin was cool and dry, her grip firm.
Goodbye, Victoria.
I walked her to the door, hyper-aware of Agent Chen listening from the kitchen, of the recording devices capturing every word. Victoria paused on the threshold, turning back to face me one last time. He did love you, you know, she said unexpectedly. In his way. For all his faults, for all his betrayals, Harold always spoke of you with a certain fondness. The words were clearly meant to wound, and they did. A final twist of the knife. If that was love, I replied steadily. Then he never understood the meaning of the word. Victoria smiled, a flash of perfect teeth in the porch light. Perhaps none of us do. And then she was gone, walking down my front path to a sleek black car waiting at the curb. I watched through the window as she got in, as the car pulled away into the night. Only when it had disappeared around the corner did I allow myself to exhale, to feel the trembling in my limbs, the pounding of my heart. Agent Chen emerged from the kitchen, her expression grim but satisfied. We got it all, she confirmed. Clear confession of the financial fraud scheme, implicit threats, everything we need. What happens now? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Now we move quickly, she said, already on her phone. I'm ordering surveillance on Victoria Chamberlain, Roger Kenton, and the others she mentioned. We'll track her attempts to access the fake accounts, gather more evidence. Within 48 hours, we should be ready to make arrests.
And me?
What do I do? Agent Chen looked at me with unexpected sympathy. You've done enough, Mrs. Montgomery. More than enough. Now you let us handle the rest. But as I sank into my armchair, suddenly exhausted, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Victoria had the fake instructions, would be attempting to access non-existent accounts. When she realized she'd been deceived, her fury would be terrible, and I would be her first target. I slept fitfully that night, despite Agent Chen's assurances that FBI agents would be watching my house. Every creak, every whisper of wind made me start awake, convinced that Victoria or Davis or some other associate had returned for revenge. Morning came with no incident, sunlight filtering through my bedroom curtains, birds singing in the maple tree outside my window. The normalcy felt surreal after everything that had happened. I made coffee, dressed, tried to recapture some sense of my routine from before Harold's death, before the revelations that had turned my life upside down. It felt like playing a role in someone else's life. Ray called mid-morning, his voice tight with concern. How are you holding up? I'm fine, I lied, staring out my kitchen window at the garden I'd neglected for days. Any news? The FBI has Victoria under surveillance. She spent most of the night at her apartment, on her computer, presumably trying to access the accounts with your fake instructions. Ray paused. She made several phone calls, too. One to Roger Kenton, lasted almost an hour. Planning their next move, I guessed, a chill running through me despite the warm morning sunshine. Most likely. Agent Chen has people watching Roger too. And Davis. They identified him based on your description and Victoria's use of his name. Ex-cop with a gambling problem, just as we suspected. I took a sip of coffee, willing my hands not to shake. How long before Victoria realizes the instructions are fake? Hard to say, Ray admitted. James set up that first verification step to look legitimate. But when she tries to access the main accounts, could be hours, could be days. And when she does realize? I couldn't keep the fear from my voice. The FBI will be ready, Ray assured me. They have enough evidence now to make arrests. They're just building the strongest possible case before moving in. After we hung up, I tried to busy myself with normal activities, laundry, bills, answering emails from friends wondering why I'd gone silent. None of it felt real. My mind kept returning to Victoria's cold smile, to the implicit threat in her final words to me. Around noon, James called. "I've been in touch with Agent Chen," he said without preamble. "They're making progress. Search warrants being prepared for Roger's office, Victoria's apartment. They're moving as fast as they can." "But not fast enough," I said, voicing my growing fear. "Victoria's smart. She'll figure out the deception soon, if she hasn't already." "That's why I'm calling," James said, his voice serious. "I think you should get out of town for a few days. Stay with your daughter in Chicago, or your son in Boston, just until this is over." "Run away, you mean?" I said flatly. "It's not running away, Margaret. It's being prudent. These people have already sent someone to threaten you in your home. When Victoria realizes you've tricked her—" "I'm not leaving," I interrupted firmly. "This is my home, my life. I won't be driven away by threats." James sighed, a sound of frustration I'd come to know well over the past week. "At least consider staying with me, then. My condo has security, a doorman. You'd be safer there than alone in your house." I promised to think about it, though in truth, I had no intention of leaving. Something in me had hardened, changed. The woman who might have fled in fear no longer existed. In her place was someone stronger, someone unwilling to be intimidated. The day passed slowly, tension building with each hour. I jumped at the sound of the mail carrier, at a neighbor's dog barking, at a car door slamming down the street. By evening, my nerves were stretched to breaking point. Agent Chen called as darkness fell. "Just checking in, Mrs. Montgomery. Everything quiet there?" "So far," I confirmed, peering through my living room curtains at the street outside. "Any progress?" "We're close," she said, professional confidence in her voice. "Search warrants executed at Roger Kenton's office this afternoon. Found documents confirming the offshore accounts, the shell companies. He's being questioned now." "And Victoria?" A slight hesitation. "We haven't been able to locate her for the past 2 hours. She left her apartment around 4 in her car. Surveillance team followed her to the financial district, then lost her in traffic." Fear, cold and sharp, stabbed through me. "You lost her? She could be anywhere. She could be." "We have agents watching your house," Agent Chen assured me quickly. 2 in an unmarked car across the street. "If Victoria Chamberlain comes anywhere near you, they'll intercept her." I wasn't reassured. Victoria was cunning, determined. If she wanted to reach me, a couple of FBI agents wouldn't stop her. "I'm sending additional officers," Agent Chen continued, perhaps sensing my fear. "They'll be there within the hour. In the meantime, keep your doors locked. Don't answer for anyone you don't know." After we hung up, I double-checked all the locks, drew all the curtains. I turned on every light in the house, unable to bear the thought of shadows where someone might hide. Then I sat in Harold's study, his desk chair positioned to face the door, and waited. My phone rang again at 9. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something, intuition perhaps, made me press the green button. "Hello." "They're fake." Victoria's voice, cold with fury. The instructions. The account numbers. All of it. Fake. My blood turned to ice. "Victoria, you thought you were so clever," she hissed. "Playing me for a fool. Leading me on a wild goose chase while your FBI friends built their case." "The FBI?" I feigned ignorance, though my racing heart surely gave me away. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Save it," she snapped. "Roger's been arrested.
His office raided.
They found everything. All the records of our operations. Davis is in custody too. It's all falling apart." Her voice dropped, became deadly quiet. "And it's your fault." I said nothing, fear closing my throat. "I underestimated you, Margaret," Victoria continued, her tone almost conversational now. "Mistook your housewifely demeanor for weakness. But you've proven quite the adversary." It's over, Victoria, I managed to say. The authorities know everything. Your best option is to turn yourself in. She laughed, a brittle, dangerous sound. Turn myself in? Spend the next decade in a prison cell? That's not how this ends. How does it end, then? I asked, trying to keep her talking while I used my other hand to text Agent Chin. Victoria called. Knows everything. Threatening me. It ends with consequences, Victoria said simply. For your betrayal. For your deception. There are FBI agents watching my house. I warned her. If you come anywhere near me. Who said anything about coming to your house? She interrupted, amusement in her voice. There are so many ways to hurt someone, Margaret. So many pressure points. A new fear gripped me. What do you mean? Your children, for instance, Victoria said casually. Your daughter in Chicago. Such a lovely family she has, those two adorable little boys. What are their names again? Jacob and Ethan, isn't it? Ages 5 and 3. Terror unlike anything I'd ever known flooded through me. If you touch my family, or your son in Boston, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. Just starting his medical residency. Working those long, exhausting shifts at the hospital. Coming home to that small apartment at all hours, never quite sure if anyone's watching from the shadows. Stop it, I demanded, my voice shaking. My family has nothing to do with this. They have everything to do with it, Victoria countered coldly. They're your weakness, Margaret. The one thing you can't bear to see harmed. My mind raced. Was she bluffing? Did she really know where my children lived, their routines, their vulnerabilities? Or was this just a final attempt to frighten me, to exert some control as her world collapsed around her? The FBI will find you, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. You can't hide forever. I don't need forever, Victoria replied. Just long enough. The line went dead. I immediately called Agent Chen, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the numbers. She threatened my children, I said as soon as she answered. My grandchildren. She knows where they live, their names. We're on it, Agent Chen assured me, her voice steady and professional. I'm contacting our field offices in Chicago and Boston right now. We'll have agents at your children's homes within the hour. They'll be protected. You don't understand, I insisted, panic making my voice rise. Victoria is desperate. Cornered. She has nothing to lose now. Which is why we're taking her threats very seriously, Agent Chen said. But Mrs. Montgomery, in my experience, these are usually just that, threats. Designed to frighten, to control. The last desperate acts of someone who knows they've lost. I wasn't reassured. I hung up and immediately called my daughter, Claire, in Chicago. She answered on the third ring, sounding tired. Mom? Is everything okay? It's late. Claire, I said, relief washing through me at the sound of her voice. Are you and the boys all right? Is David home? We're fine, she said, confusion evident in her tone. The boys are asleep. David's here. What's going on? You sound strange. I closed my eyes, wondering how much to tell her. I'd kept Harold's betrayal, the financial fraud, all of it for my children, trying to protect them, to preserve their memories of their father. But now their safety was at stake. Claire, I need you to listen carefully, I began. There's a situation. People connected to your father, to his business, are unhappy with me. The FBI is involved, but as a precaution, they're sending agents to keep an eye on your house tonight. FBI. Claire's voice rose in alarm. Mom, what are you talking about? What situation? What did Dad do? I can't explain everything now, I said, hearing the weariness in my own voice. Just know that you might see agents outside your house. Don't be alarmed. They're there to protect you. Protect us from what? Claire demanded. Mom, you're scaring me. It's just a precaution, I repeated, trying to sound calm. I'll explain everything soon, I promise. For now, just stay inside. Keep the doors locked. After extracting a reluctant promise from Claire, I called my son, Michael, in Boston. It went to voicemail. He was probably at the hospital, working one of those long shifts Victoria had mentioned. I left a message asking him to call me as soon as possible, then texted him the same. Then I sat in Harold's study, surrounded by remnants of his life. Books he'd read, awards he'd won, photos of a family that had never known the truth about him, and felt more alone than I ever had. My phone rang again. Unknown number. My heart jumped into my throat. Victoria again? I answered cautiously. Hello. Mrs. Montgomery? This is Officer Daniels with the Chicago Police Department. We've been asked by the FBI to check on your daughter's family. Relief flooded through me. Yes, thank you. Have you seen them? Are they all right? We're at the residence now. Everyone's fine. Your daughter seemed confused about why we're here, but we've explained it's just a precautionary measure. After similar confirmation from the Boston police that they were watching Michael's apartment building, I felt some of the tension leave my body. My family was being protected. Whatever Victoria planned, she wouldn't be able to harm them. Which left me. I knew I should feel afraid, knowing Victoria was out there somewhere, furious and desperate. But strangely, I felt calm. The worst had already happened. My husband's betrayal, the discovery of his double life, the threats against my children.
What more could Victoria do to me?
As if in answer to my unspoken question, my phone pinged with a text message. Unknown number again. Come to the warehouse. Thursday club. Just you and me. 1 hour. Or I release everything I know about Harold's illegal activities to the press. His reputation, your children's memories of their father, destroyed forever. I stared at the message, my mind racing. The warehouse, RH Importing, where the Thursday club had met. Where Ray had overheard Victoria and Roger planning. It was a trap. Obviously, transparently a trap. Victoria wanted me alone, away from FBI protection, to exact her revenge. I should call Agent Chen. Tell her about the message. Let the FBI handle it.
But something stopped me.
A certainty that if I involved the FBI, Victoria would make good on her threat. She would expose everything about Harold's crimes, ensure his name was dragged through the mud. My children would learn the worst about their father in the most public, humiliating way possible. I thought about Claire and Michael, about how they'd grieved for Harold, how they treasured their memories of him as a good father, a good man, despite his flaws. Did they deserve to have those memories tainted, destroyed? Did they deserve to have their own lives, their careers, their reputations affected by their father's crimes? I made my decision. I texted back. I'll be there.
Alone. No FBI.
The response came immediately. Smart choice. Come in through the side door. 1 hour. Don't be late. I knew what I had to do. I changed into dark clothes, black slacks, a navy sweater, and comfortable shoes. Then I went to the kitchen and removed the cast iron skillet from its hook. The same one I'd used against Davis. It had served me well once before. I slipped out the back door of my house, hoping the FBI agents watching the front wouldn't notice my departure. I took the garden path to the back gate, then cut through my neighbor's yard to reach the street behind mine, where I called a rideshare. The driver, a young man with headphones and a distracted air, barely glanced at me as I gave him the address of a coffee shop 2 blocks from the warehouse. Better not to go directly to the meeting place, in case Victoria was watching. As we drove through the quiet night streets, I texted Ray, meeting Victoria at the warehouse. My choice, not hers. Don't call the FBI yet. His response was immediate. Are you insane? Wait for me. Do not go alone. I turned off my phone. I couldn't risk Ray alerting Agent Chen, sending the FBI storming in. Not yet. Not until I'd spoken to Victoria, tried to reason with her, protect what was left of my family's dignity. The coffee shop was closed when we arrived, dark and shuttered for the night. The industrial district was deserted at this hour, streetlights casting pools of sickly yellow light on empty sidewalks. I paid the driver and waited until his taillights disappeared around a corner before walking the remaining 2 blocks to the warehouse. RH Importing looked abandoned in the darkness. No lights, no cars parked outside. For a moment, I wondered if Victoria had set me up, sent me to an empty building while she carried out some other plan. But then I saw it, a faint glow from one of the side windows. Someone was inside. I approached the side door cautiously, the cast iron skillet heavy in my hand. I'd wrapped the handle in a dish towel to muffle any sound, to provide a better grip. Not much of a weapon, but it had worked against Davis. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, wincing at the slight creak of hinges. A dim hallway stretched before me, a single light burning at the far end. I moved toward it, my footsteps silent on the concrete floor. The light came from an office, a small room with a desk, filing cabinets, a few chairs. And sitting behind the desk, as poised and elegant as ever despite being a fugitive, was Victoria. "Right on time," she said, glancing at her watch. "I appreciate punctuality." I stood in the doorway, not entering fully, keeping my distance. The skillet was hidden behind my back, my body angled to conceal it. "I'm here," I said simply. "Now what?" Victoria gestured to a chair across from the desk.
Sit.
"We have things to discuss." "I prefer to stand." She shrugged elegantly. "Suit yourself. Though this may take a while." I remained where I was, watching her carefully. She seemed calm, collected, not like someone on the verge of violence. But there was something in her eyes, a hardness, a coldness that hadn't been there before. "You've destroyed everything," she said conversationally. "My carefully constructed operation. My relationship with Roger, and the others. Access to the offshore accounts. My entire life, really." "You destroyed it yourself," I countered. "By choosing to steal, to threaten, to manipulate." Victoria laughed softly. "Such moral clarity. And yet here you are, meeting me in secret instead of sending your FBI friends to arrest me. Why is that, Margaret? What are you hoping to accomplish?" "I want to make a deal," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Leave my family alone. Never contact my children. Never reveal what Harold did. In return, I'll tell the FBI I don't know where you are, give you time to disappear." She studied me, head tilted slightly. "Interesting. You're willing to obstruct justice to protect Harold's reputation? The man who betrayed you, lied to you for years." "Not for him," I said firmly. "For my children. They don't deserve to have their memories tainted, their lives disrupted, because their father made terrible choices." Victoria considered this, tapping her perfectly manicured nails on the desk. "A noble sentiment. But why should I agree? What's to stop me from destroying Harold's legacy anyway, out of pure spite?" "Because it gains you nothing," I said, taking a calculated risk. "Revenge against a dead man? Is that really worth spending the rest of your life as a fugitive?" Something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, perhaps. Or calculation. "I could disappear," she agreed slowly. "I've done it before. New name, new identity, new hunting ground." She smiled coldly. "There are always wealthy men looking for companionship, willing to overlook certain irregularities for the right incentives." "Then go," I urged. "Leave tonight. Start over somewhere else. Forget Harold. Forget me. Forget all of this." Victoria laughed, the sound echoing in the small office. "Just like that? After everything that's happened? After you tricked me, humiliated me, destroyed years of careful planning?" "It's your best option," I insisted. "The FBI knows everything now. Roger is talking Davis too, probably. They'll find you eventually if you stay." She stood up suddenly, and I tensed, tightening my grip on the skillet behind my back. But she merely walked to a filing cabinet, opened a drawer, and removed a folder. "Do you know what this is?" she asked, holding it up. "Evidence. Records of every transaction Harold made, every dollar he moved offshore, every lie he told his investors. Enough to destroy his reputation forever." My heart sank. "If you're planning to release that anyway, why am I here?" "Because there's something else." Victoria reached into the drawer again and pulled out a small object. A thumb drive. "This contains personal material. Emails between Harold and me. Photos.
Videos.
Things no wife would want to see, and certainly nothing children should know about their father." I felt sick. "You're blackmailing me." "I prefer to think of it as negotiating," Victoria corrected smoothly. You want to protect Harold's memory, your children's innocence. I want something too. What? I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. Money, she said simply. The legitimate assets Harold left you. The house, the business, what's left of it now that the FBI is involved. I want it all signed over to me. I stared at her in disbelief. You can't be serious. Perfectly serious, Victoria replied, placing the thumb drive on the desk between us. You sign everything over to me. I give you this and the folder. All the evidence. You and your children get to remember Harold however you choose, and I get what I deserve after 3 years as his companion. It would take days to arrange something like that, I said, playing for time. Legal documents, transfers, signatures. I'm aware, Victoria said calmly. Which is why you're going to call your lawyer friend, James, isn't it? Right now and get the process started. As a show of good faith. And if I refuse? Her smile was cold, predatory. Then first thing tomorrow, every news outlet in the city receives copies of these documents. Every sordid detail of Harold's crimes, his affair with me, everything. Your children will learn what kind of man their father really was, along with the rest of the world. I took a deep breath, considering my options. I could try to reason with her further, but Victoria clearly wasn't in a reasonable mood. I could pretend to agree, buy time while alerting the FBI. Or I could use the skillet, try to overpower her, and take the evidence myself. None of the options seemed good. Victoria was watching me too closely for a surprise attack. And even if I managed to get the thumb drive and folder, what was to stop her from having backup copies elsewhere? I need to think, I said finally. Think quickly, Victoria replied, glancing at her watch again. You have 5 minutes before I need your answer. I turned away slightly, pretending to consider her offer while actually assessing the room. There was only one door, the one I'd entered through. The desk between us would make a lunge for the evidence difficult. And though I couldn't see a weapon, I had no doubt Victoria was prepared for any physical confrontation. Then I noticed something on the desk, a small lamp, providing the dim light I'd seen from outside. It was plugged into an outlet behind Victoria. The cord ran across the floor, creating a potential hazard. An idea formed in my mind. Risky, potentially dangerous, but possibly my only chance. All right, I said, turning back to face her. I'll call James. Start the process of transferring everything to you.
Victoria smiled triumphantly.
I knew you'd be reasonable. Family means everything, doesn't it? I reached for my phone with my free hand, making a show of turning it back on. It'll take a moment to power up. It's late. James might not answer. He'll answer for you, Victoria said confidently. He seems quite devoted to your welfare. While waiting for my phone, I took a small step forward, then another, as if moving closer to improve reception. Victoria watched me, but didn't seem alarmed. I was still on the other side of the desk, still at a safe distance. You know, I said conversationally, I've been wondering something. All those other men before Harold. Did any of them suspect what you were doing? Did they try to stop you, like Harold did at the end? A flash of annoyance crossed Victoria's perfect features. Harold was weak, sentimental. The others were more pragmatic. Until they died. I noted. Convenient timing, all those deaths. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Careful, Margaret. You're venturing into dangerous territory. Just curious, I said mildly, taking another small step forward. Heart attacks, strokes, accidents, all natural causes, I'm sure. Just like Harold's heart attack. Your phone, Victoria reminded me sharply. Is it working yet? I glanced down. Almost. While we're waiting, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. That night at the funeral home, when you first threatened me, did you already know Harold had changed the access protocols? That he'd cut you out? Victoria's jaw tightened. I suspected. He'd been distant in the weeks before his death. Evasive about the accounts. I confirmed it afterward, when I couldn't access the main funds. So you came to his funeral to threaten his widow, I said, my voice hardening. While I was grieving, you saw an opportunity to intimidate me. Business, Victoria said with a shrug. Nothing personal. It felt personal. I countered, taking one more step forward. Now I was at the edge of the desk, close enough to see the details of the documents in the folder Victoria had placed there. It felt very personal when your associate broke into my home, threatened me in my own kitchen. Victoria's hand moved slightly toward her purse sitting on the desk. A gun? A knife? I didn't intend to find out. Your phone, she said again, her voice taking on an edge. Call James.
Now.
You know what I've realized, Victoria? I said, ignoring her demand. You're not as clever as you think you are. 3 men before Harold, all following the same pattern. The authorities would have connected the dots eventually, even without my help. Anger flashed in her eyes. My patience is wearing thin, Margaret. Make the call, or I release everything tomorrow. I pretended to look at my phone again, still powering up. Old model, slow processor. I glanced back at her. One more question. The heart attacks, the strokes, all natural causes, the autopsies said. How did you manage that? Victoria's smile was cold, reptilian. Curious, aren't you? Some things are better left unknown, Margaret. Not to me, I said firmly. Not anymore. I'm done being in the dark, being the clueless wife who doesn't ask questions. Fine, Victoria snapped, her composure cracking slightly. Since you're so interested in how your beloved husband died, certain medications, in the right combinations, can trigger cardiac events that look natural. Untraceable, especially if the victim already has a history of heart problems. Like Harold did. The confirmation of what I'd suspected hit me like a physical blow. She had killed him, murdered my husband when he was no longer useful to her, when he threatened to expose her scheme. You killed him, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Victoria's smile was vicious now, triumphant. I retired him, like the others. When men outlive their usefulness, when they become sentimental or difficult, sometimes a clean break is necessary. In that moment, something changed in me. The last lingering doubt, the last hesitation about what I needed to do, vanished. This woman had murdered my husband, had threatened my children, would never stop being a danger as long as she was free. My phone's ready, I said, holding it up. I'll call James now.
Victoria nodded, satisfied.
Speakerphone. I want to hear everything. I pretended to dial, then held the phone to my ear as if it were ringing. James? It's Margaret. I need your help with something urgently. I paused, as if listening to a response. Yes, it's about Harold's estate. I need to transfer everything, the house, the business assets, everything, to someone else. Victoria watched me intently, her focus on the supposed conversation. This was my chance. In one fluid motion, I dropped the phone, grabbed the cast iron skillet from behind my back, and swung it with all my strength, not at Victoria, but at the lamp cord running across the floor behind her. The heavy skillet caught the cord, yanking it violently. The lamp toppled from the desk, plunging the room into darkness as it crashed to the floor. Victoria cursed, momentarily disoriented by the sudden darkness. I lunged forward, grabbing the folder and thumb drive from the desk, then turned to run. I heard movement behind me, Victoria recovering, reaching for her purse perhaps, for whatever weapon she kept there. I didn't wait to find out. I ran through the doorway into the dim hallway, heart pounding, clutching the evidence to my chest. Behind me, a sharp crack split the silence, a gunshot. Something whizzed past my ear, embedding itself in the wall ahead. She was shooting at me. I ran faster, zigzagging as best I could in the narrow hallway. Another shot, this one going wide. I reached the side door, fumbling with a handle in my panic. You can't escape, Margaret. Victoria's voice called from behind me, eerily calm despite the situation. There's nowhere to run. Give me the evidence, and perhaps I'll let you live. The door finally opened. I burst outside into the cool night air, immediately veering left, away from the light of the nearest street lamp. Darkness was my ally now. I sprinted across the empty parking lot, heading for the street. Where could I go? My phone was still inside, on the office floor. I couldn't call for help. Headlights suddenly illuminated the parking lot, a car turning in from a street. I froze, momentarily blinded, unsure if this was help or another threat. The car screeched to a halt. The driver's door flew open, and a familiar figure emerged. Margaret, Ray's voice, urgent and concerned. "Get in now." I ran toward him, relief flooding through me. Behind me, I heard the side door of the warehouse bang open. Victoria in pursuit. Another gunshot cracked through the night. Ray ducked, then straightened, a gun in his own hand now. "FBI. Drop your weapon," he shouted. I reached the car, yanking open the passenger door and diving inside. Ray remained outside, his gun trained on Victoria's approaching figure. "Drop it now," he commanded again. "You're surrounded." It was a bluff. I could see no other agents, no backup. Just Ray, standing alone against a murderer. Victoria must have realized it too. She fired again, the muzzle flash bright in the darkness. Ray returned fire, 3 rapid shots that echoed across the empty lot. Victoria stumbled, then fell. For a long moment, everything was silent. Then Ray approached her cautiously, gun still raised. I watched through the car window, heart hammering in my chest, as Ray knelt beside Victoria's prone form. He checked for pulse, then looked back toward the car, shaking his head slightly. She was gone. The woman who had seduced my husband, stolen millions, threatened my children, and confessed to multiple murders, lay dead on the cracked asphalt of an industrial parking lot. I should have felt something, relief, satisfaction, even grief for the waste of human life. Instead, I felt numb, the folder and thumb drive still clutched tightly to my chest. Ray returned to the car, holstering his weapon. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, checking me for injuries. I shook my head. "How did you find me?" "Your text," he said, starting the engine and pulling out his phone. "I tracked your location before you turned your phone off. Then I called for backup. They should be here any minute." He was already dialing. "This is Donovan. I need emergency services at the RH importing warehouse. 1 suspect down, gunshot wounds. And tell Agent Chun her primary suspect in the Montgomery case is no longer a concern." As Ray spoke to the authorities, I sat quietly, processing what had just happened. Victoria was dead. The immediate threat to me, to my children, was over. But I still held the evidence of Harold's crimes, of his betrayal, in my hands. "What's that?" Ray asked when he finished his call, nodding toward the folder and thumb drive. "Evidence," I said simply. "Of everything. Harold's financial crimes, his affair with Victoria. And this," I held up the thumb drive, "contains personal material. Photos, videos, emails between them." Ray nodded slowly. "The FBI will need all of it." "I know," I said, though part of me wanted to destroy it all, to protect what was left of Harold's reputation, to shield my children from the worst of the truth. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Soon the parking lot would be filled with police cars, FBI agents, paramedics. There would be questions, statements to give, evidence to process. "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly exhausted. Ray's expression softened. "Now we let the authorities handle the rest. You've done enough, Margaret. More than enough." "My children," I said, the thought of them bringing fresh worry. "They still don't know everything. About Harold, about what he did." "You'll have to tell them eventually," Ray said gently. "Not everything, perhaps, but enough so they understand what's happened, why their lives might be disrupted for a while." I nodded, knowing he was right. Claire and Michael were adults. They deserved the truth, or at least a version of it that wouldn't destroy their memories of their father completely. The first police cars arrived, lights flashing blue and red across the parking lot. Ray squeezed my hand briefly, then opened his door. "Stay here. I'll handle the initial explanations." I watched as he approached the officers, badge in hand, explaining the situation. More vehicles arrived, unmarked cars that probably contained FBI agents, an ambulance that was now unnecessary. Through the windshield, I could see Victoria's body, illuminated now by the harsh lights of the emergency vehicles. In death, she looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. Just a woman who had made terrible choices, whose schemes had finally caught up with her. Agent Chen arrived, speaking briefly with Ray before approaching the car. She opened my door, her expression a mixture of concern and relief. "Mrs. Montgomery, are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said automatically, though I wasn't sure that was true.
Victoria confessed.
To everything. The financial fraud, sending Davis to threaten me, and to killing Harold, something about medications that could trigger a heart attack without being detected. Agent Chen's eyebrows rose. She admitted to murder? Multiple murders, I confirmed. The other men before Harold. She called it retiring them when they became difficult or threatened to expose her. Agent Chen shook her head slightly, professional composure momentarily broken by genuine shock. "We suspected, but couldn't prove it. The autopsies showed nothing unusual." "She was careful," I said, handing over the folder and thumb drive. "This is everything she had. Evidence of the financial crimes, the offshore accounts, and personal material." Agent Chen took them carefully. "We'll need a full statement from you. And you should know, this case will eventually become public. There will be press interest, especially given the murder confessions." I nodded, having already accepted this reality. I need to tell my children first, before they hear it from someone else. "Of course," she agreed. "We can arrange that. And Mrs. Montgomery, thank you. Your cooperation, your courage throughout this investigation, it's been extraordinary." I managed a small smile. Not courage. Necessity. When your life falls apart around you, you either crumble or you find strength you didn't know you had. The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements, FBI questions, and forms to sign. I sat in the back of an FBI vehicle, a blanket around my shoulders though I wasn't cold, and recounted everything, from Harold's death to Victoria's final confession. Dawn was breaking by the time they finished with me. Agent Chen offered to drive me home herself. "We've arranged for protection at your house for the next few days," she explained as we drove through the awakening city. "Just a precaution. We don't believe there's any remaining threat, but until we've rounded up everyone connected to the Thursday Club, we want to be certain." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. The adrenaline that had carried me through the night was gone, leaving me hollow and drained. "Your lawyer, Mr. Harrington, has been informed of tonight's events," Agent Chen continued. "He was quite concerned when he heard you'd gone to meet Victoria alone." A small smile touched my lips at the thought of James's reaction. He'd be furious with me, in his dignified, lawyerly way. "Worried too. And your children are safe," Agent Chen added. "The surveillance teams will remain in place today, then withdraw once we're absolutely certain there's no risk." "Thank you," I managed to say. When can I tell them? About everything?" Agent Chen glanced at me, sympathy in her professional gaze. "Whenever you're ready. The case will remain confidential during the initial investigation, but eventually there will be legal proceedings, possibly press coverage. It would be better if they heard it from you first." I nodded again, dreading the conversations to come. How did one tell adult children that their father had been a criminal, an adulterer, possibly even murdered by his mistress? That the stable, respectable life they'd grown up in had been partially built on lies and fraud? As we pulled up to my house, I was surprised to see James's car already in the driveway. He was sitting on my front porch, looking rumpled and anxious, a far cry from his usual immaculate appearance. He stood as Agent Chen parked, hurrying down the path to meet us. "Margaret. Thank God." He reached for my hands, his relief palpable. When Ray called, told me what happened. "I'm fine, James," I assured him, though fine seemed an inadequate word for what I was feeling. "Just tired." "You're staying with me," he said firmly, not a question but a statement. "At least for a few days. I've already packed some of your things." He gestured to a small suitcase sitting on the porch. I started to protest, then stopped, suddenly overwhelmed by the thought of spending another night in the house I'd shared with Harold. The house where Davis had attacked me, where Victoria had sat on my sofa and threatened my family. "All right," I agreed softly. "Just for a few days." Agent Chen nodded approvingly. "I think that's wise, Mrs. Montgomery. One of our agents will follow you to Mr. Harrington's residence. Remain outside for security. We made arrangements for my continued cooperation with the investigation, for statements I'd need to give in the coming days. Then Agent Chin left, another dark FBI vehicle taking her place across the street, my promised protection. Come on, James said gently, guiding me toward his car. You need rest. Everything else can wait. I let him take my suitcase, lead me to the passenger seat, drive me away from the house that no longer felt like home. As we turned the corner, I didn't look back. James's condo was exactly as I'd expected, tasteful, masculine, impeccably neat. He showed me to his guest room, where crisp sheets and fluffy towels awaited. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry, he said awkwardly, hovering in the doorway. Or I can make something. Whatever you need. Sleep, I said simply. That's all I need right now. He nodded, looking relieved to have a clear directive. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you wake up. I slept for nearly 12 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep that was more like unconsciousness than rest. When I finally awoke, disoriented in the unfamiliar room, evening shadows were stretching across the floor. I showered, changed into fresh clothes from the suitcase James had packed. He'd chosen well, practical items that offered comfort rather than style, and finally emerged to find him in the living room, working on his laptop. He looked up immediately, setting his work aside. How are you feeling? Better, I said, surprised to find it was true. The fog of exhaustion had lifted, leaving my mind clearer than it had been in days. Any news? James nodded, gesturing for me to sit. Roger Kenton is cooperating fully with the FBI, turning over evidence against the other members of the Thursday Club in exchange for leniency. Davis, too, though he's facing separate charges for breaking into your home, threatening you. And Victoria? I asked, still unable to fully process that she was gone, that I'd witnessed her death. The medical examiner confirmed her identity. Victoria Chamberlain, also known as Veronica Chambers, along with several other aliases the FBI is still untangling. They're investigating her connection to the deaths of her previous companions. James hesitated, including the possibility that she murdered Harold. I nodded slowly. She admitted it. Last night, at the warehouse. Said something about medications that could trigger a heart attack without being detected in an autopsy. James's expression darkened. The FBI mentioned that. They're consulting with medical experts, reviewing Harold's autopsy results. It may be difficult to prove definitively, but given her confession to you and Ray, she killed him, I said with quiet certainty. When he threatened to expose her, to confess everything, she eliminated him, like she'd done to the others. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of this knowledge settling between us. What happens now? I asked finally. With Harold's company, the investors' money, all of it? James sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. It's complicated. The legitimate assets, the house, Harold's personal accounts, his official stake in the company, those remain yours as his heir. The offshore funds, if they can be recovered, will likely be returned to the investors who were defrauded. Good, I said firmly. I want no part of that money. Never did. There will be lawsuits, James warned. Once the fraud becomes public, investors will seek compensation. Some may try to come after the legitimate assets, arguing they were purchased with fraudulent funds. Let them, I said, surprising myself with my indifference. The house, the cars, the vacation property in Vermont, none of it matters anymore. It's all tainted now.
James studied me for a moment.
You've changed, Margaret. Through all of this. Had to, I replied simply. The woman I was before couldn't have survived this. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. What will you tell Claire and Michael? The question I'd been dreading, the one I'd pushed aside until now. The truth, I said after a long pause. Not all of it, perhaps. Not the worst details. But enough so they understand what their father did, who he really was. Do you want me there? When you tell them? The offer touched me deeply. Thank you, but no. This is something I need to do myself. James respected my decision, as I knew he would. Over dinner, takeout from a nearby Thai restaurant, neither of us having the energy to cook, we discussed practical matters. The ongoing FBI investigation. The potential legal issues I might face. My financial situation, which was both better and worse than I'd feared. Better because Harold's legitimate assets were substantial. Worse because untangling them from his fraudulent activities would be complex and costly. You should consider selling the house, James suggested gently. Too many bad memories there now. Make a fresh start somewhere else. The idea was both terrifying and liberating. Leave the house I'd lived in for 20 years? Start over somewhere new, somewhere without Harold's ghost, without the echo of Victoria's threats? Maybe, I conceded. After all this is settled. The next morning, I called my children. First Claire, arranging to fly to Chicago the following day. Then Michael, who agreed to meet me there as well. Better to tell them together, I decided. Better to face their shock, their questions, their inevitable grief as a family. The FBI provided an agent to accompany me on the flight, still cautious, still concerned about potential threats from associates of the Thursday Club who remained at large. But the protection felt unnecessary now. Victoria was gone. The immediate danger had passed. What remained was the harder, slower work of rebuilding my life from the wreckage she and Harold had left behind. Claire met me at O'Hare, her face tight with worry. Mom, what's going on? First the police at our house. Now you flying out with an FBI escort? You're scaring me. Let's wait for Michael, I said, hugging her tightly. I only want to explain this once. We went to her house in the suburbs, where her husband David greeted me with confused concern while their boys, my grandsons, remained blissfully oblivious to the tension, excited simply to see their grandmother. Michael arrived that evening, having taken the first flight he could get away from his hospital duties. He looked tired. Residency was grueling, but alert, worried about what could be so urgent as to require this family gathering. After the boys were in bed, the four of us sat in Claire's living room. David brought wine, we all needed it, and I finally told them everything. Harold's affair with Victoria, the financial fraud, the Thursday Club, Victoria's threats, her confession to murder, her death at the warehouse. I spared them the worst details, the explicit nature of the materials on the thumb drive, the specific threats Victoria had made against them. But I gave them the truth they needed, the reality of who their father had been beneath the respectable facade. Claire cried, silent tears tracking down her cheeks as David held her hand. Michael sat stone-faced, his doctor's composure cracking only when I described how Victoria had likely induced Harold's fatal heart attack. All those years, Claire said finally, her voice thick with emotion. All those business trips, late nights at the office. We never suspected. None of us did, I assured her. Your father was very good at compartmentalizing his life, at keeping secrets. How can you be so calm about this? Michael asked, a hint of anger breaking through his careful control. He betrayed you, lied to all of us, and now we find out he was a criminal, that his mistress murdered him. How are you not falling apart? I reached for his hand, surprised to find my own was steady. I did fall apart at first, when I learned about Victoria, about the fraud, about all of it. But then I had to put myself back together, had to find strength I didn't know I had. To protect us, Claire said softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. You confronted this woman, risked your life, to protect us from knowing the worst about Dad. To protect you from her, I corrected gently. The truth about your father, that was always going to come out eventually. But her threats against you, against your families, that I couldn't allow. We talked long into the night, going over the same ground, the same questions, the same disbelief that the man they'd known as their father had led such a double life. There were moments of anger, of grief, of confusion. But by the time we finally went to bed, exhausted and emotionally drained, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. The truth was out. My children knew. The worst of the secrets had been exposed to the light. I stayed in Chicago for a week, giving Claire and Michael time to process, to ask more questions as they arose, to begin the difficult work of reconciling the father they'd loved with the man he'd really been. David was a steady, supportive presence for Claire, and Michael's medical training gave him a clinical distance that seemed to help him cope. By the time I returned home, to James's condo, not to the house I'd shared with Harold, the initial shock had passed. Now came the practical matters: cooperating with the ongoing FBI investigation, meeting with Harold's former business partners who hadn't been involved in the fraud, consulting with financial advisors about my new reality. The FBI kept me updated on their progress. More arrests were made: bankers who had facilitated the offshore accounts, lawyers who had created the shell companies, financial advisors who had helped conceal the transactions from regulators. The Thursday Club was dismantled piece by piece, its members facing various charges depending on their level of involvement. Roger Kenton received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation. Davis pled guilty to breaking and entering, assault, impersonating a police officer. The evidence from Victoria's files, combined with forensic accounting of the offshore accounts, painted a comprehensive picture of the fraud scheme Harold and Victoria had orchestrated. As for Harold's death, the medical examiner reviewed the autopsy findings in light of Victoria's confession, but could find no definitive evidence of foul play. The heart attack appeared natural, consistent with Harold's medical history. Without Victoria alive to testify, to explain exactly what she'd done, how she'd induced the heart attack, the case remained officially undetermined. But I knew, and in a strange way, that knowledge gave me closure. Harold hadn't simply abandoned me through death. He'd been murdered by the woman he betrayed me with, a final irony in our complicated marriage. 3 months after Victoria's death, with the FBI investigation winding down and the first legal proceedings against members of the Thursday Club beginning, I made my decision. I would sell the house, as James had suggested. Start fresh somewhere new. Where will you go? James asked when I told him. We were having dinner at his condo, a routine we'd fallen into over the weeks I'd stayed with him. Back to teaching, perhaps? I considered the question. I was 58 years old, financially secure despite the legal complications of Harold's estate. I could go anywhere, do anything. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Maybe travel for a while. See the places Harold always promised to take me but never did. Find out who Margaret Montgomery is when she's not defined by being someone's wife. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. You've earned that freedom. Paid for it dearly. Too dearly, I agreed. But it's mine now, regardless. We were silent for a moment, comfortable in each other's company in a way I hadn't experienced in years. James had been my rock through all of this, my attorney, my advisor, my friend. Something more, perhaps, though neither of us had acknowledged it yet. What about you? I asked, venturing into territory we'd carefully avoided. What does James Harrington do when he's not rescuing clients from criminal conspiracies? He smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his serious face. I've been thinking about that, actually. About making some changes of my own. Oh. I raised an eyebrow, encouraging him to continue. I've been practicing law for 30 years, he said thoughtfully. Built a successful career, a comfortable life. But lately, I've been wondering if it's enough. If there's more I should be doing with whatever time I have left. Like what? He shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Teaching, perhaps. Sharing what I've learned with law students. Or focusing more on pro bono work, helping people who really need legal assistance but can't afford it. I reached across the table, covered his hand with mine. I think that sounds wonderful. A new chapter for both of us. He turned his hand, interlaced our fingers. A simple gesture, but significant. Perhaps some of those chapters could be written together? If you're interested, that is. The question was tentative, giving me plenty of room to gracefully decline if I wasn't ready. But looking at James, steady, honest James who had stood by me through the darkest period of my life, I realized I was ready. Not for declarations of love or grand commitments, but for the possibility of something new. Something true. I'd like that, I said softly. To see where this leads. His smile was worth every hardship I'd endured to reach this moment. 2 weeks later, the house sold, Quickly, despite the notoriety that had begun to attach to Harold's name as the fraud case made its way through the courts. I donated most of the furniture to charity, kept only a few personal items, photographs of the children, mementos that held positive memories. The day I handed over the keys to the new owners, a young couple expecting their first child, blissfully unaware of the drama that had unfolded within those walls, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The house had never been just a house. It had been the physical embodiment of my marriage to Harold, of the life we'd built together. Leaving it behind was the final step in leaving that life behind too. James helped me move my remaining possessions into storage. I'd rented a small apartment downtown, a temporary base while I figured out my next steps. He'd been true to his word about making changes in his own life, reducing his client load to make time for teaching a course at the local law school. We were taking things slowly, carefully. Weekly dinners, long conversations, occasional hand-holding. Neither of us was in a rush, both aware of the complexities of starting a relationship after everything that had happened. 6 months after Harold's death, the first criminal trial began. The banker who had set up the original Cayman accounts for Harold and Victoria. I attended the opening day, sitting in the back of the courtroom as the prosecutor outlined the scheme, naming Harold and Victoria as the primary architects. It was strange to hear my husband's name spoken in that context, to see the evidence of his crimes laid out so methodically. The bank transfers, the falsified documents, the elaborate deceptions that had allowed him to steal millions while maintaining the facade of a respectable businessman. During a break in the proceedings, a reporter approached me in the hallway outside the courtroom. Young, eager, notebook in hand. "Mrs. Montgomery? Jennifer Chen, Boston Globe. Would you be willing to comment on the case? On your husband's involvement in the fraud scheme?" I'd anticipated this moment, prepared for it. The story was becoming public now, would only grow more so as the trials continued. Better to shape the narrative than let others define it for me. "My husband made terrible choices," I said simply. "Choices that hurt many people, his investors, his business partners, his family. I can't explain or excuse those choices. I can only say that the man who committed these crimes was not the man I thought I'd married." "And Victoria Chamberlain?" the reporter pressed. "Your husband's mistress? The woman who allegedly murdered him and then threatened you?" I took a deep breath. Victoria Chamberlain was a predator who targeted wealthy men, manipulated them, and ultimately destroyed them. My husband was one of her victims, though that doesn't absolve him of responsibility for his own actions. "You've lost everything," Jennifer Chen noted, studying me with professional curiosity. "Your husband, your home, possibly your financial security, once the lawsuits are settled. How are you coping?" I considered the question, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The grief, the rage, the fear, the determination. The woman I'd been, and the woman I'd become. "I haven't lost everything," I corrected her gently. "I've lost illusions. About my marriage, about the man I shared my life with. But I've gained something too, a clearer understanding of my own strength, my own resilience." "Any regrets?" she asked, pen poised over her notebook. I thought about Harold, about the 30 years we'd spent together. About the good times, there had been good times, especially in the early years. About our children, the one true gift our marriage had produced. "Only that I didn't see the truth sooner," I said finally. "That I accepted less than I deserved for so many years. But that's behind me now. I'm looking forward, not back." The reporter seemed surprised by my composure, perhaps expecting more bitterness, more dramatic emotion. But the time for drama had passed. What remained was the quiet, steady work of rebuilding. As I left the courthouse that day, I noticed James waiting by his car. He hadn't attended the trial. I'd wanted to go alone, to face this milestone on my own terms, but he'd come to drive me home afterward. A small gesture of support, one of many he'd offered over these difficult months. "How was it?" he asked as I approached. "Surreal," I admitted. Hearing it all laid out like that, the extent of Harold's deception, the elaborate planning that went into it. It's still hard to believe I lived with him for 30 years and never suspected. James opened the car door for me. He worked very hard to keep you in the dark, to maintain the separation between his two lives. Yes, I agreed, settling into the passenger seat. But I also didn't look too closely, did I? Didn't ask the hard questions. Accepted the late nights, the business trips, the vague explanations about finances. You trusted your husband, James said simply. That's not a failing, Margaret. Maybe not, I conceded. But I won't make that mistake again. Blind trust is a luxury I can no longer afford. James started the car, pulling away from the courthouse. Where to? Your apartment. I looked out at the city passing by, at the autumn leaves swirling in the October breeze. In a week, I would be leaving for a month in Europe, my first solo trip, a chance to see places I'd always wanted to visit but never had. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. When I returned, I would begin volunteering at a women's shelter, using my experience to help others finding their way out of difficult situations. Actually, I said, making a spontaneous decision, let's go somewhere for lunch. That new cafe by the river. I hear they have an excellent view. James smiled, changing direction. Lunch it is. As we drove, I thought about the path that had led me here. The shocking revelations at Harold's funeral. Victoria's cruel taunts. The will reading that had been both vindication and the beginning of a nightmare. The threats, the confrontations, the final deadly encounter at the warehouse. I had survived it all. More than survived. I had emerged stronger, clearer about who I was and what I wanted from the remainder of my life. The woman who had stood trembling in that funeral home, ashamed and humiliated by her husband's betrayal, was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who had faced the worst life could throw at her and remained standing. Penny for your thoughts? James asked, glancing over at me. I smiled, feeling genuine warmth spread through me. I was just thinking about transformations. How sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted in order to discover what we truly need. And what do you truly need, Margaret? He asked, his voice gentle. I considered the question seriously. Authenticity.
Truth.
Connection that's based on who I really am, not who someone wants me to be. I looked at him directly.
What about you?
What do you truly need? He took his time answering, thoughtful as always. Much the same, I think. At our age, the pretenses fall away. Or they should. Life's too short for anything less than honesty. We arrived at the cafe, found a table by the window overlooking the river. The water sparkled in the autumn sunlight, leaves of gold and crimson drifting on its surface. We ordered lunch, talked of ordinary things, a book James was reading, my upcoming trip, news of my grandchildren. And in that ordinary moment, watching the river flow past, I felt something I had not expected to feel again. Contentment. Not happiness, exactly, that would take more time, more healing. But a quiet satisfaction with where I was, who I was becoming. The past could not be changed. Harold's betrayal, Victoria's crimes, the damage they had done to so many lives. All of it was written in stone now. But the future remained unwritten. My future. A blank page waiting for me to find the courage to fill it. As James reached across the table to pour me more water, his hand briefly brushed mine. A small contact, casual yet intentional. I met his eyes, saw the question there, the patience, the respect. Thank you, I said simply, for everything. He nodded, understanding all I wasn't saying. You never needed rescuing, Margaret. You just needed someone to remind you of your own strength. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle into my bones. I had never needed rescuing.
Not really.
What I had needed was to rescue myself, to discover the woman who had been hiding beneath decades of compromise and self-denial. That woman was emerging now, day by day, choice by choice. Stronger for having been tested, clearer for having faced the truth, more authentic for having survived betrayal. As we finished our lunch and stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, I took a deep breath, feeling the future open before me like the river, flowing, changing, carrying me forward to whatever came next. Not an ending, then. A beginning. My beginning at last.